Just a little disclaimer for today's video. All revenue will be going towards the Etsy witch that I will be paying to keep Joe Burrow healthy this year. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 17 team in my preseason power rankings, as today we'll be taking a deep dive into the Cincinnati Bengals, and this video does mark the midway point for this series. It's been an amazing ride so far. This has been as good as it's ever been for this deep dive series, so a huge thanks to you guys at the midway point here, and please do continue hitting that like button down below, seeing that little football animation pop up when you do. It really does support this video, supports this series, tells other NFL fans, NFL sickos really, that you enjoy the video and to check it out. So thank you for that. Make sure you're subscribed as well so you don't miss the remaining teams in this big countdown. And also, as we get started, we have a really exciting guest here today. Joe Goodberry becomes the first Bengals guest in the history of this deep dive series, and boy was he an insightful, fun interview. Excited to welcome Joe to the deep dive series. I think a lot of Bengals fans are excited to see Joe here as well. So that will be towards the end of the video. Do not go anywhere. You're not going to want to miss that interview. And I just got to say, man, 17 for the Bengals seems so low. I tweeted it out, but this cluster here, especially like 19 to 15, those that follow this series closely know I put in all the individual ratings for all the different categories for the team that we go through, and I've got a big formula that spits out a final rating. That's the nature of this series. It has never been tighter in the middle of the league since I've been doing things this way. Literally the same team grade for the Vikings, who came in last, the Bengals here, and our next two teams. And the Cowboys were 0.01 behind that mark as well. So really crazy tight here. Just goes to show you how good and how deep the NFL is this season. I think it is. There is a reason for that, by the way. I think teams are just getting much better at team building, managing the cap, and finding ways to fill their needs. Even, yes, the Cincinnati Bengals, who I am very excited to discuss here today. Let's go ahead and get started. As always, we will begin by taking a look at this coaching staff, and they're running it back with Zach Taylor, Al Golden, and company here. No changes this offseason with this coaching staff. And as we start talking about Zach Taylor and the coaching structure here, you know, I think there is this like big public opinion that Zach Taylor's a bit of a freeloader and a Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase merchant. And you know what I have to say to those people? Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I got a lot of fun things to talk about with this Bengals team here today. I'm not the biggest Zach Taylor guy. I'm not. I think he's just here. He's my 27th ranked head coach. Frankly, he's just never really passed the eye test to me as a good offensive-minded coach, someone that can really uplift things. I don't know that he's fully incompetent either, right? Like, I think there's a ton of parallels between kind of how he is as a coach and how Mike McCarthy was for so many years, with Aaron Rodgers really doing so much of the heavy lifting with those Packers teams. And honestly, I look at this in so many ways like that married couple where one person is just way out of the other person's league. The only problem here for Joe Burrow is it was an arranged marriage, and he doesn't have a choice in this. He's just got to make the best out of his life here with Zach Taylor, because the Bengals, being the organization that they are, that give these guys the longest of leashes. I mean, their GM has been here for, almost 30 years at this point, in Duke Tobin. Believe it or not, this is the 8th year here for Zach Taylor in Cincinnati. I think Zach Taylor should be on the hot seat, but I don't know that that's the route they're going to go. I just don't, unless Joe Burrow gets hurt and things really go south here. If you want to say one nice thing about Zach Taylor, it's that he has had relative success having some backup quarterbacks step in and exceed expectations. For a couple of years ago, it was Zach Browning, played all right for what Zach Browning is. Last year, Joe Flacco came in and was borderline awesome. Granted, so much of that is still the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins of it all. And really, when things were going well with Joe Flacco last year, it was just like, hey, we are going to basically treat Jamar Chase and T. Higgins like they are a lead back in our backfield, and we're going to just funnel 30 targets a game to those guys. And they had some success doing that, right? Because those receivers are freaking awesome. The thing for me with Zach Taylor just comes back to the eye test, right? Like, at no point have I really watched the Bengals for 8 years here and been like, look at that really creative wrinkle that he brought to the table. Look at that awesome play design that really got guys open for Joe Burrow or made things easier for the quarterback. And it's not just me, right? Like, as a national media, like, when was the last time you saw a football nerd out there bring up the tape and like dive into something really cool that Zach Taylor's doing as the offensive minded head coach of the Bengals? It just doesn't happen. In fact, when you've heard national media or football nerds like myself talking about Zach Taylor, it's been in a negative light. Like, earlier in his career, there was a lot of criticism that he basically came in, was the guy that knew Sean McVay, really didn't have the most impressive resume, and their playbook looked like a copy and paste version of Sean McVay's playbook. And on top of that, they had like really predictable first down runs and did not get the most out of that offense, certainly early in the Zach Taylor regime. One of the best offensive moments from a scheme point of view that the Bengals have had in the 8 years under Zach Taylor was was it the 2023 season? Forgive me. Where they basically changed their offense overnight after yet another characteristic slow start for this Bengals regime, which just dropped that on top of all this. They always start slow and feel ill-prepared heading into a new season. That's another big issue with Zach Taylor. But I think it was 2023 where they basically went from that very like Sean McVay, Shanahan style play action oriented offense to Brian Callahan and Joe Burrow basically stepping in, overriding Zach Taylor's scheme and just saying, no, we're going to spread it out. We're going to do what Joe Burrow did so well at LSU. Some of the things Brian Callahan was familiar with, and completely evolved this offense into, honestly, so much of what it is today. The Bengals were the number one team in shotgun rate last season. They have become an inside run game as a result of that, because the nature of being in the gun is you're going to run up the middle, inside zone between the tackles. Outside zone out of shotgun just doesn't really work. The geometry and the angles just get busted when you try to run that out of shotgun. So they have completely evolved from what Zach Taylor was supposed to be bringing to the table with the Sean McVay offense. And Joe Burrow has kind of continued to run that here, and Zach Taylor's kind of overseen that offense now that it's kind of evolved here. But I'm not giving really Zach Taylor credit for that. I guess it's somewhat notable that he's been able to adapt and call a different offense than the one he was supposed to bring to the table here. But yeah, man, I'm not a big fan of Zach Taylor. I think that much is clear. I don't think he really elevates this team at all. I think we've seen, especially with Joe Burrow's influence, like sometimes there are these quarterbacks that bring so much of a mental advantage, whether it is pre-snap or in preparation, knowing what sort of plays they want to install and what's working, what's not working. I think Joe Burrow is probably the best asset from an offensive coaching side of things that the Bengals have here. And I think overall, like, for my offensive coach rankings, they're still solid, right? 16th to 22nd for pass game. The same B- grade there that I have for their run game coaching, which is 14th to 23rd. There's still a decent enough baseline there, right? If things were so bad that they were like way below those marks, we probably would have seen Zach Taylor fired by now. I like the Mike McCarthy parallel where he's like just good enough to keep his job, but the Bengals are trying to win Super Bowls, right? With a Joe Burrow at quarterback. They are in so many ways held back by Zach Taylor compared to the other premium coaches that are going and getting those rings. Like Mike McDonald was a driving force in the Seahawks going to win a Super Bowl, right? Like that's not going to be the case in Cincinnati. It's going to be a player-driven effort to get them there. And it just is frustrating because it feels like it shouldn't be that hard to make a change and find something better here. But Zach Taylor's here and just might be here for a few more years at least. They also have Dan Pitcher, is the offensive coordinator who was promoted when Brian Callahan left for that Tennessee job. And it is funny when Brian Callahan showed up Zach Taylor with what we know about Brian Callahan's regime in Tennessee. Woof. But yeah, Dan Pitcher hasn't really done too much to stand out to me either here. Nothing against the guy. I'm sure he knows some ball. He's kind of under the cloud of Zach Taylor in many ways. So that's kind of where I'm at with the head coach plus offensive coaching here. Not overly impressed, obviously. And then as we talk about the defensive coaching here for the Bengals, there's a lot to prove here as well, man. Al Golden got hired last year. He's someone that was here in Cincinnati back in 2020, 2021. Those really impressive Bengals defenses under Lou Anarumo. Al Golden then goes for the Notre Dame defensive coordinator job and then comes back here after the Bengals kind of scapegoated Lou Anarumo for the defense's drop-off. Not that Lou had been perfect, but I think we all know it was a roster problem, and that was the same case last year. Like, it was really impossible to assess whether or not Al Golden was doing a good job because Trey Hendrickson goes down and they just didn't have the horses to build any sort of a competent defense out there. I think he's qualified, right? I do. He's had a ton of college experience. He's worked in the NFL for the better part of 6 years. Was certainly a hotter name, having had some success at Notre Dame. And I'm still not prepared to say that Al Golden is a bad coach. But what I will say is that it certainly was not a good coaching job last season. We do sometimes see defensive coordinators transcend having a garbage roster, like we talked about with Brian Flores, for example, in last year's deep dive. It's rare, it's hard, and you know it when you see it that guy is a great coach. We didn't see that type of effort from Al Golden. I'm still not ready to jump on the guy and say he's terrible. I rank him in that bottom tier cluster of just, qualified but completely unproven defensive coaching with C+ grades across the board. Really in the bottom 8 cluster of there's about 8 of these guys in the league right now. So very much up in the air, hopefully with, another offseason to push some buttons here, get some more guys in here that maybe fit what he wants to do a little better, make some adjustments off of what happened last year. I'm still keeping an open mind with Al Golden, but I'm not going to sit here and defend him as a great coach at this point in time. We just haven't seen that. And this Bengals defense was atrocious last year, right? They might not have made the playoffs even if Joe Burrow was healthy last year because this defense was so bad underneath Al Golden and a roster that just was not prepared. What we can do is at least look at what he did from a scheme point of view and maybe discuss what we could expect this year. What really stands out to me about Al Golden is that they were dead last in the NFL in blitz rate. So this was arguably the least aggressive defense in the NFL. And that's, I think, a choice that so many defensive coordinators that don't have good talent have to make. Do you go the sort of Jonathan Gannon in Arizona route where you're just going to get weird and blitz a bunch and just cause chaos and hopefully something good happens? Or do you kind of do what Al Golden did here and just drop in his own coverage? They ran the 6th most cover 3, the 4th most cover 6, only blitzed 11% of the time. They basically stayed in a base nickel. They ran base 4-3 defense 21% of the time, which was 24th in the NFL. When they did blitz, they zero blitzed, which is probably smart. Just if you're going to blitz, you might as well try to get home. And they did have some decent corners last year, at least on the outside as the year went on. So they did at least mix in some cover 1, 15th, dead smack in the middle of the league for running man coverage. It is also fascinating that they were dead last in cover 4. That's curious. Does Al Golden just hate quarters? Yet they ran quarters to half the field about as much as anybody in the league, running cover 6 as much as they did. So that's, I don't necessarily know what to think about that, but it is noteworthy as potentially an Al Golden tendency. But regardless, this is what they ran last year. I have no idea how things are going to change. It'll be curious to see what they think of what happened last year. Do they blitz more? Do they mix in more true quarters coverage? Do they even ramp up the amount of cover 1 that they run here? There's a lot of different routes they could go with a pretty busy offseason on the defensive side of things. But clearly, this was their plan last year and it did not work. So I would recommend some sort of adjustments. It is a big year for Al Golden. I think just like if he can prove to be a good defensive coach. Like I said, I'm not writing him off. That would go a long way towards this team accomplishing their goals and maybe even pushing for a Super Bowl. But if he is just one of the worst defensive coaches in the league, which I can't write that off at this point either, that's going to be debilitating as it was last season. So he's a big wild card for this team's season for sure. So there's my stance on this Bengals coaching staff. I'm excited to talk about this Bengals roster that, as I've said, is really going to have to do most of the heavy lifting here and uplift a rather mediocre coaching staff, in my opinion. But before we take a look at that roster, I want to thank the sponsor for today's deep dive, and that is Prize Picks. Prize Picks lineups are here to help you get through these final few weeks of the dog days for sports fans. You can build lineups for MLB games, all sorts of other sporting events going on as well. I cannot believe I missed the low-hanging fruit of integrating Kyler Murray into the fact that there was a Call of Duty event that you could build lineups through on Prize Picks last weekend. But that is a testament to all of the different picks you can make on Prize Picks, putting your lineups together, selecting higher or lower on any number of player stats. They also have team picks now available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. There you can pick the winner, spread, and total on any major game. And as we get closer and closer to football season here, I'm excited that Prize Picks has a social media aspect as well. So you'll be able to follow along with my lineups, really trying to find these winning lineups throughout the NFL season, really doing my research to hit on those. So you can follow that at TFG_football there through the social aspect of the Prize Picks app. And now they have a brand new promotion. You will get $150 if you win your first $5 lineup there on Prize Picks. Really an exciting new deal they got going on there. So make sure you use code HMA when you sign up. Please do play responsibly. And thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's video. All right, let's get into this Bengals roster. And a few weeks ago, I flirted around with a format change for the breaking down the offseason changes for these teams, and I'm going to largely keep things the same, but in a case like this with the Bengals offense, they hardly changed anything. So in unique cases, I don't think it's a bad idea to just get this out of the way and take a look at their whole offseason on the offense. When we go to defense, I'll continue to do it through the individual positions, because I do agree it's nice to kind of keep that fresh in your mind as we spend so much time going through these different position units. But obviously, the Bengals weren't too worried about mixing things up with this offense. The game plan here is clearly, we're getting Joe Burrow back healthy. Hopefully things can stay that way, but the offense is largely set. We're going to pump in so many of those resources, including trading that number 10 overall pick for Dexter Lawrence. Spoiler alert for the defensive side of things. But as you go through these positional changes from this offseason for the Bengals offense, like, okay, quarterback's upgraded. You get Joe Burrow back, who played in 8 games last year. They do say goodbye to Jake Browning because Joe Flacco has kind of come in and taken that backup role, as we'll see here in a second. No change at running back, so staying neutral there, staying neutral at wide receiver, really doing nothing there except for spending a 4th-round pick on Colby Young out of Georgia. Tight end, staying neutral. They do let Noah Fant leave, who played a rotational role but was unimpactful for them. They do get Eric All back, hopefully, one of the more injury-prone players in the league over the last few years since he came into it, though. And then I did say slightly upgraded on the offensive line with some day 3 draft picks there, but very minimal. I even considered just leaving that neutral to make a point that, like, the only thing really getting better here is Joe Burrow coming back. But they do have some interesting day 3 guys coming in there, and Connor Liu out of Auburn and Brian Parker out of Duke. But I like that that's kind of out of the way there. Sets a clear narrative here, and now we can really dive into this roster and break down each position group for the Bengals. And we'll start at quarterback, with Joe Burrow coming back healthy. And when he did come back towards the end of last season, it was yet another reminder that, like, God, if Joe Burrow could just stay on the field, he's always played at such a high level, but he just might have a strong case for who the best quarterback in the entire NFL is. And I'm not even like trying to be like a hot take artist or whatever. I'm just telling you how I honestly feel. From the moment he came back, week 13 and beyond, it just didn't even feel like a question to me that Joe Burrow was the best quarterback in the NFL felt like we were really robbed of a really special season seeing Joe, like at this point, 29, going on 30 years old. The mental side of things for him have just reached such a high level that he is in the peak of his powers. And I think it's very realistic that if Joe Burrow can stay healthy, he can earn the crown as who the best quarterback in the NFL is. It's just he's missed so much time that nobody, even myself included, as I have him as the third ranked quarterback for the purposes of this series, but no one's comfortable outright saying that Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in the NFL. But every time he steps on the field, you kind of second guess yourself and say, hold on, is he? Because he is, to me, the most cerebral quarterback in the NFL in terms of pre-snap, post-snap, processing and decision-making. He can break down safety rotations, recognize defenses, recognize the blitz pre-snap, find those quick adjustments, make checks at the line, understand his protections, you name it. He's one of the most accurate throwers in the league. People criticize his arm talent. It seldom holds him back. He throws one of the best deep balls in the league. In fact, okay, maybe he can't quite drive it 55, 60 yards down the field like theoretically a Patrick Mahomes or some of these other guys could do. Well, in the case of Patrick Mahomes, he's got a rocket arm, but he might be one of the worst deep throwers in the NFL over the last 3 years. Joe Burrow is one of the best, and he's got a weaker arm because he puts it on the money. He leads guys out in front. He throws with touch. He throws these beautiful catchable passes for these receivers to elevate and get the most out of their skill sets as well in the vertical passing game. But he's not afraid to attack any part of the field. You know, a lot of these higher end quarterbacks, there's criticisms about like, oh, he doesn't attack this part of the field or that part of the field. You don't have that on Joe Burrow. He equally distributes the ball to all parts of the field. He'll use the whole field and stretch defenses out to the point that they have to defend every blade of grass. He takes incredible care of the football. Last year in 8 games, he had the best turnover-worthy play percentage by double in the entire NFL. His turnover-worthy play rate last year was 0.7%. I can't stress how good that is. Second and third place were also guys that didn't play complete seasons. So Kirk Cousins and Kyler Murray were under 2%. And then the next guy down was Jared Goff at 2%. So Burrow was more than double that, right? So like I said, the processing decision-making has reached the elite of the elite level, probably the highest point we've seen since Tom Brady retired. And then on top of all that, he extends plays. He has that elite pocket presence that he always had going back to LSU. I don't think we've had a Bengals deep dive yet without me bringing up my pro comp where I said he's Tom Brady from the waist up, Aaron Rodgers from the waist down in terms of having that pocket navigation, getting out of sacks, extending plays when he needs to, but not bailing out of clean pockets and doing it when it leaves meat on the bones of plays that you can make from the pocket. He is playing quarterback at about as close to a perfect level as you can draw up. It's just time missed, and you have to factor that in, right? It's enough for me to say he's the third QB in the league. I have him as the second ranked passing quarterback in the NFL. But I do not think it's far-fetched if we could get a season or two of him staying healthy, that it becomes more of a mainstream idea that he's the best QB in the league. So he is obviously everything for this Bengals team. His health is the biggest wild card for this squad, and that's obvious, right? But glad this series at least gives us a few minutes at least to wax poetic about Joe Burrow here. Now, we do have to praise Joe Flacco, believe it or not, at, Jesus, what is he, 42 years old? Yes, will turn 42 this season. The dude played awesome last year for about a month. When he came in from Cleveland, he looked awful with the Browns, came here to Cincinnati and just like overnight, like I think he was traded on like a Monday and was starting that weekend or something. It was a really quick turnaround. And he had about a month stretch when he stepped in where he was, you know, from week 6 to week 9, if you did the ball knowing alien test, he played like a top 10 quarterback. Now it started to taper off. I think the offense, while he picked things up quickly, it did feel rather rudimentary, where it was just like, you're going to hit the top of your drop and we're going to fire the ball to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. It did feel like teams eventually caught on to like just how much they were funneling the passing game to those guys. So, you know, we saw we saw 8 turnover-worthy plays in his last 3 starts, and then at the right time, Joe Burrow came back. So, he's got a 70 rating. He's not a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, but I do think to an extent, like, he can clearly still throw the crap out of the football. He's always had a great arm. And credit to Joe Flacco, like, he's a useful backup at this point to the fact that if Joe Burrow has an injury, but it's not so much a long-term one, like, whatever, if he goes down for 2 to 3 weeks, you might feel a little bit better about the Bengals being able to hang around and keep themselves in the playoff mix, and then get Joe Burrow back healthy. So it is good that he's here as, at least from what we saw last year, probably one of the best backups in the NFL, especially within the confines of this offense, where he clearly has a good rapport with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And then after that, you got Josh Johnson. I mean, what a funny backup quarterback room, right? Joe Flacco and Josh Johnson. Johnson also 40 years old and has infamously played for like every football franchise on planet Earth. These two guys combined are 81 and a half years old. So that's hilarious. And then also Sean Clifford's here. Not sure how he still has a position in the NFL, but fortunately not going to play a factor here one way or another. So, the Bengals came in third for me at quarterback. Just got to keep Joe Burrow healthy, and that goes without saying. Now, let's go to running back here. And the Bengals have really found themselves something in Chase Brown, who came in as a day 3 pick. He's now heading into a contract year, and he's really reached like the best case scenario for what you could have hoped for with Chase Brown, where he's got really great speed. He runs hard. He's an awesome pass catcher. I loved him at Illinois because he did everything for that offense. I think he had I'd have to go back and check my notes, but I want to say he had 55% of the Illinois scrimmage yards that season. Just crazy production. And he's really settled in terms of vision and ball security, which were maybe a little bit more of question marks for Chase Brown. And he's now, I would say, a top 15 running back in the NFL, and that's reflected in the team grade here, where they come in 15th to 18th for running back in this series. And, I think when you start to stack up NFL running backs, there's guys that have more size, more of a power profile, that have even higher degrees of shiftiness and dynamism. But you really like what you're getting in Chase Brown and feel as solid as the Bengals have felt in a few years since Joe Mixon was able to stay healthy and be in his prime for this team. The fact that he can just be out there for all 3 downs and kind of run any run scheme, and you don't really have to worry about it at this point with him, is yet another big luxury that this offense has to work with here. We'll see if they're able to lock him in here long term. Now with back-to-back years, over 1,000 scrimmage yards. Last year he surpassed 1,000 rushing yards for the first time and is likely to do that again here pending health. He's not getting any cheaper, right? And Chase Brown knows that. It's probably why he hasn't signed a contract quite yet, betting on himself a little bit. The Bengals have some guys, especially on the other side of the ball, that they're trying to figure out where they want to distribute their money. I think they probably get something done here, but the longer this goes on, the more interesting it becomes. Ultimately, though, they are in really good hands this season. I would say Chase Brown is at this point a running back that, relatively speaking, does elevate your run game. And we at least saw in the second half of last year, the Bengals were actually able to run the ball pretty well, relative to the last few years. And Chase Brown's explosiveness and the vision consistency really coming along was a big part of that. Now, their backup situation is pretty mediocre. I mean, Samaje Perine is useful for what he is, but he is almost exclusively a third down and goal line guy. He's, big. He plays certainly over 220 pounds, if not at 230. If you just need a yard, he'll get you 2. He can do that and take care of the ball doing so and play physical on some of those runs. He's also one of the better pass blockers in the league. He's got sure hands. He's a handful in checkdowns in the screen game for guys to get to the ground in space. He has his role as a backup, especially a third down backup. But if something were to happen to Chase Brown, you're in a little bit more scary territory, whereas a lot of other teams have guys that could probably step in and at least tote the rock at a starting caliber level. Taj Brooks is the guy you're maybe hoping could break through. I thought he was a nice contact balance oriented back coming out and a good pickup for this team. he just hasn't really gotten opportunities and done much with the few touches he has had. So you're starting to kind of like, give up on him a little bit, I think, as more of an interesting back when he came into the league. Talent theoretically is still in there. So if he gets an opportunity, he'd be the guy I'd be curious to see, if they want to give him that opportunity. Otherwise, maybe they would go try to make a trade or do something else in a worst case scenario there. Otherwise, you got like Gary Brightwell has bounced around the league, kind of a straight line, one-dimensional back that's just not very good. 3 other names vying for a job here that aren't going to really stand out to you. So the depth is suspect here. Got to keep Chase Brown upright, but as long as he's there, the Bengals are in a really good place with an uplifting running back here in Chase Brown. And then we get to talk about the Bengals' weapons, which, like, if any group of weapons in the NFL didn't need too much of a deep dive into it, and most people are familiar with, it's probably the Cincinnati Bengals, hence why they are my number 1 ranked unit. Like, obviously at this point, well documented how good Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are. We'll start with Jamar Chase, though. Like, he, to me, is currently the best wide receiver in the NFL. I'm sorry to JSN. I'm sorry to Puka. Those guys are incredible, and they're not too far behind Jamar Chase. I'm still taking Jamar Chase if I got to pick one of those guys, and I think everybody that's not a Rams or a Seahawks fan probably is too. Like, he truly is the built-in-a-lab, complete receiver. For a few years, there was like a lower contested catch win rate and some drop problems. Not last year. Chase kept that drop rate under 5%. 6 drops might sound like a lot, but when you're getting 182 targets and half of those are coming from backup quarterbacks, even if Joe Flacco's a pretty good one, 4.6% is really good. For example, his career rate's at 6.1% and got up over 7% in 2024. But the contested catch win rate was a career high for him. Came down with 18 out of 33 contested catch targets. His career is at 43%. I think this year, that was something I talked about. Like, if he wants the crown, the ball skills have to go from good to great, and they did. So we're giving him the crown. Everything else speaks for itself. This guy is, like I said, that built-in-a-lab freak athlete, separates elite run after catch energy, converts into a running back after the catch. He had 23 missed tackles forced last year. It was the second most in his career. He's one of the best vertical threats in the NFL because he can get open deep, but also just makes batshit crazy catches down the field. He is obviously the elite of the elite. And then there's T. Higgins, who looked incredible last season after the Bengals decided to pay him. There was a lot of debate on whether or not they were going to do it. But this is, without a doubt, the face of this team, and the reason this team has a chance at high-end upside is the trio of Burrow, Chase, and T. Higgins, which is really just something nobody else has, right? This level of quarterback play with the number 1 ranked weapons in the league, fully driven by these 2 guys right here, obviously. Really, the one thing with T. Higgins is he, like Joe Burrow, has missed a little bit too much time at this point for our liking. The weird thing with Higgins, though, is it's not like really significant injuries. It's been like 3 straight years where he's kind of missing a month here, a month there, and that was no different last year. Got banged up and missed a few games in the middle third, basically weeks 11 through 15 range, the third quarter of the season, I suppose you could say. Some guys are injury prone because they've had these massive like season or career altering injuries. And you're like, well, yeah, like, okay, they've lost a little juice, or are they going to have another massive injury? There's no real reason with T. Higgins that he should be getting banged up like this. It's just kind of happened. So it almost feels like he's due for a full season of health. But at this point, like, he's got to prove that he can stay healthy for a full season, which has been a bummer for him. But at large, like, he's been available. It's just like, could there maybe be some bad luck where in the biggest of games, maybe T. Higgins can't go? It's more of that type of a scenario with him, it feels like. But largely he's been available, and he, to me, especially as Mike Evans, Mike Evans is still great, but talk about injury problems and kind of being on a regression arc. Maybe it'll still Mike Evans as well, but like T. Higgins is definitely the model for what a high-end X wide receiver looks like. He works the sidelines, hitches, digs, go balls, dominates on contested catches. His ability to high point the ball, play with body control, deal with physical coverage, contort near the sideline, and be a reliable second target if and when they aren't going to Jamar Chase. What an asset, man. He is phenomenal and would be the number one receiver, like rightfully so and comfortably so on, I don't know, a third of the teams in the NFL. And he is definitively your number two. So that's effectively how you land at this being the best group of weapons in the NFL, is you have the best number one and probably the second best number two. Like with A.J. Brown going to Philly, because Devonta Smith was in that conversation. Devontae Adams, like, maybe, but he's getting older, right? And then the big one would be like George Pickens, who I'd probably take Pickens over T. Higgins at this point. It's very close, and they're very similar types of guys, but at worst, he's the third best number two. That's how you really build this as the elite of the elite groups of weapons in the NFL. And then after that, like, you just need guys with a pulse to keep the floor alive when you aren't going to Chase or Higgins. And they have that. They have a handful of other ancillary options here. Most notably, I'm actually going to go to the tight end and running backs here, and then we'll go through the wide receiver depth. But Mike Gesicki has really landed at a nice point later in his career after being a bigger name earlier on, and, you know, falling off and then finding a good home in a good system here in Cincinnati that really utilizes his skill set well. Like, they have Drew Sample here to be the, in many ways, like their starting Y inline tight end. So when it's earlier downs and they do want to run 12 personnel, they'll ask Drew Sample to do the hard stuff at tight end. That Gesicki's always been this like half wide receiver, half tight end. It's a reason some teams struggle to like get the most out of him earlier in his career, because you got to be able to use this guy right. But the Bengals do, schematically speaking. You know, he'll play off the wing in 12 personnel, and then he's effectively their number 3 wide receiver in so many different packages, whether you're spreading things out and he's more of a starting slot wide receiver type of option, or taking him and putting him more outside, which can be a really good tell depending how teams want to defend you. Like if you take Mike Gesicki and put him at X or Z on the outside and a linebacker or a safety follows him out there, you know you got man coverage. So he can be a really nice tell in that way. And he has actually impressed me in some of his tape recently. Like, he can still really move. He's always been a fascinating guy, because there was honestly some years there, like especially later in the Miami days, where I didn't think he was playing up to that 4.54 40 time. That kind of made him this interesting mismatch problem. He looks fast to me in his time here in Cincinnati. He can stretch the seam, be that mismatch problem. He has been really great on contested catches and has been a really nice guy to help move the chains in sticky situations. He's actually converted 15 out of 27 contested catch targets in his 2 years here in Cincinnati. So especially if like T. Higgins is going to be out for a few games, Mike Gesicki can be that trust guy. If Jamar Chase can't, you know, if you can't get the ball to Chase. So he is what he is. You know, you're not going to act like he's a star or anything like that. But to me, he is probably the third most important member of this pecking order and does some really nice stuff here. And then you have Chase Brown, who's one of the better receiving backs in the NFL. He's gotten more and more involved here over the years, has gone from 150 yards as a rookie to 360 in 2024 to 437 receiving yards last year on 86 targets. He had 17 missed tackles forced in the receiving game last year. Obviously, like, he is a really good player with the ball in his hands. That's why he's a top 15 running back in the NFL. But he's come down with contested catches here. He's had explosive plays. He's a really nice piece here. He really is. So you pair that with Gesicki as just really nice ancillary options behind Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and that's really nice. Like, if you drop in a below average receiving back and a bad tight end, this might not be the number 1 ranked weaponry in the NFL. And then you get into your wide receiver options. So Andre Iosivas is going to be the primary number 3 wide receiver here. He's He's fascinating to me. I don't love that they like him as much as they do. I feel like there are other skill sets that I would prefer to mix in here with what you have. Iosivas to me feels like some awkward blend of what you already have in Chase, Higgins, and Gesicki. Like, I'd rather have either just like a true vertical burner, which I don't think Iosivas is that, or give me like a gadget run after catch devil. To have Iosivas here is kind of weird from a roster construction standpoint. He's tall, he's fast, he's had really good games, and he's had dog shit games. Like, his hands are week to week, to be nice. Like, I'm not really counting on Iosivas to like take this big step. He gives you another kind of freak athlete here and a first guy off the bus type mixed in with this wide receiver room. He's not horrible. They hardly ever throw him the ball when these guys are all healthy. It doesn't really matter. And technically, if T's going to go down, Iosivas can step in. I would prefer Iosivas was just a true backup, though. And that's why I'm fascinated by Mitchell Tinsley. I feel like Tinsley, especially showing some really big flashes after making this team last year. I was a big fan of Mitchell Tinsley coming out in the draft. I compared him to Kendrick Bourne, and I think that would actually give you a better complementary group of skill sets as the fifth piece, as someone that's probably a little bit more physical and hungry as a run blocker from 11 personnel. Someone that's a little more physical and attacks the ball more consistently over the middle of the field and gives you a little bit more after the catch. I don't know. We'll see if he kind of overtakes that job or if he's just a wide receiver 4 here. I like Mitchell Tinsley. He's got an opportunity here as he's pretty clear cut the wide receiver 4. Charlie Jones also, like, theoretically would be more of that shifty gadget slot guy. He's a really good returner here. He just hasn't really proven enough to stay on the field on offense, but I do feel pretty good about him making the team. And then they spend that 4th round pick on Colby Young. I was definitely not on board with Colby Young as a 4th round pick. He is the classic, honestly, I'll say it, he's the classic Georgia wide receiver at this point that looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane type, where like, and I didn't go back to look at Colby Young's recruiting pedigree or whatever. Maybe the dude was a walk-on. I don't know. But this is the characteristics of the classic like Georgia wide receiver where he's 6'2", 210 pounds, tested well. He shows up at the Shrine Bowl and you're like, spot the NFL wide receiver. You're going to point to Colby Young, who looks like freaking Jamar Chase out there in a Georgia helmet. And then he starts running routes and trying to catch the football and you're like, oh, that's why he's a 24-year-old prospect that never got involved in Georgia's offense. Like, to me, was kind of an undrafted level prospect. They spent a 4th round pick on him. Maybe something can change coming out of the Georgia environment that I'm not particularly fond of, their passing game. Maybe something can click, but I just did not see it with him. So I would be very surprised if he honestly does anything here, and we'll see if I'm wrong about that, right? And that's really your wide receiver depth. You do have some interesting tight end depth. I mentioned Drew Sample, who's literally just here as an extension of your offensive line. He has very little instincts in the receiving game at all, but he plays his role and had one of his better years for the Bengals in 12 personnel, getting this run game going a little bit. Tanner Hudson has been good at times here. He's kind of the definition of a tight end 3, kind of a jack of all trades, master of none type. Eric All is probably the fascinating one. Was sort of the next Iowa tight end prospect, something that's kind of lost its luster a little bit. This idea that if you played tight end at Iowa, you're just going to magically be good, even if you didn't do much at Iowa. Eric All had some fun moments and was underutilized in college, but I mean, he couldn't stay healthy in college. He can't stay healthy here. When he's played, he's blocked. He's been dynamic, but how healthy is he? How long can he stay healthy? Like, there's a reason he's still here after all these injuries. He's fascinating, but you cannot pencil a single snap in for Eric All. He's currently healthy, though, which is nice. We'll see if he can stay that way. I like Jack Endries, kind of the next in line of these. Like, Texas has a type of just like not fast, not particularly big, but heady, consistent tight ends. Realistically, something like a Tanner Hudson is probably roughly his trajectory. But I think could get in the mix as a late day 3 pick. And there's always a, I don't know, 15% chance he could be even more than that. But yeah, you do have some interesting names at tight end for sure. But that definitely rounds out my number 1 ranked group of weapons in the NFL for the Cincinnati Bengals. Please, let's just keep all these guys healthy, because my goodness, they can cook when it all comes together. But there is still one very important position group to discuss for this Bengals offense that right now you're like, hold on, how are the Bengals not number 1 in the power rankings? Like, they got one of the best QBs in the NFL. They got the best group of weapons. Holy hell. Well, Zach Taylor's a part of it. And then this offensive line, it doesn't match the level of the quarterback and weaponry for sure. The Bengals came out as my 22nd ranked offensive line, which is it's progress, right? Like, the Bengals came in, I think last year, bottom 5 for offensive line with major guard questions. And they don't have those massive question marks anymore. Now it's more about like, the floor is really nice, honestly, with this Bengals offensive line, at least the starters. But can some of these guys continue to take steps to the point that maybe this can be more of a top half offensive line in the league, which is certainly possible. But yeah, they came out 22nd for overall offensive line for me, in that massive cluster in the middle of the league of kind of indistinguishably solid pass blocking units, which ranks 9th to 18th in the NFL. Not intentional. It's just there just happened to be a big cluster in the middle of the league this year that it's hard to separate one over the other. And then run blocking for me, and this is tough because they actually did finish the season strong, but they did come out as my 29th ranked run blocking unit, which surprised me a little bit. I think this isn't the first offensive line that's happened with. It feels like there's more good offensive lines in the NFL, or at least solid offensive lines in the NFL, than we've seen in the history of this series, but they did come out 29th and hopefully can continue to climb there, especially. But let's go left to right here. And also shout out Joe Goodberry. He has a phenomenal breakdown of this offensive line as well. So you're really going to get like 2 O-line deep dives inside this deep dive. And Joe, I think, is even a little higher on this O-line than me, but let's get into my perspective on these guys. So starting at left, you've got Orlando Brown Jr., who is kind of smack dab in the middle of the league, is a very solid left tackle at 6'8", somewhere between 340 to 350 pounds, depending on how much Skyline chili he ate that week. He is a sheer force to get through, not so much a sheer force to get around. So he, to me, is a little bit more of a matchup-dependent offensive lineman. I think we've seen him struggle with some of the faster guys. Like, he had some really bad games, for example, against like Pittsburgh last year, dealing with a Nick Herbig and a Highsmith and guys that are like really speedy and bendy around the edge. Those are the guys that are going to give him more fits, but any sort of power profile, like, he's going to be able to match that power. He's also a pretty clunky athlete. So the run blocking it's just very, very one-dimensional. He can create some drive and be just a sheer piece of volume moving forward in the inside run game, but he will fall off blocks. He can struggle to reach his landmarks. Strength matters, but so does movement and athleticism to be a complete, consistent run blocker. But it all combines to leave him, a very solid, if not more matchup dependent and inconsistent tackle. At a point in time, I would have said he's overrated and overpaid, but at this point, he's actually settled in making like $16 million a year. I think he's valued correctly and provides good value to this offensive line as a floor raiser. But then you have Dylan Fairchild, and this is a case of like, I'm not afraid to admit when I was wrong. I wasn't a big fan of Fairchild's tape. I thought he was too tall. I thought he struggled to get low and find and sustain leverage in both phases in his Georgia tape. Did not see the same issues with him on the Bengals, especially in the second half of the year. Maybe in the first month of the season, you saw maybe some of what I saw in his Georgia tape, where it was just like he struggled to consistently get his hands on guys. But he figured it out, man. He really did. And in both phases, he definitely had the right mentality and athleticism moving forward to make it work as a run blocker. Just had to more consistently get his hands inside and drive his feet with leverage. And pass blocking, he just put it all together from a technique standpoint. And, he is really an ascending young guard at this point. Was a 3rd round pick that that I wasn't necessarily betting on, but the Bengals did. And right now, after he finished so strong in his rookie season, you're pretty intrigued by his trajectory. He still had some losses. We're not all the way there yet with him as just a bona fide star. But year two could be really impressive for him. And then you have Ted Karras at center. It feels like he's been here forever at this point. One of the more experienced centers in the league at this point. You're not going to fool him and Joe Burrow on stunts and pass rush games. Like, the Bengals are about as well equipped to deal with your bullshit basically as anyone in that sense. Now, athletically speaking, in a one-on-one sense, extremely limited, right? Especially as a run blocker, he just doesn't bring too much to the table there. He's a big reason why you get that big split for the pass blocking versus the run blocking. And really, all these guys are either balanced or more pass block oriented than run block oriented. Karras is the most pronounced split in that regard, though. But really, the only quote unquote concern on Ted Karras, outside of his run blocking's nothing to write home about, is he is getting older. So do we see a steep drop off randomly? Or I guess it wouldn't be random. It's 33 years old. It's coming at some point, but perhaps suddenly would be a better description of that. Whereas he's still been a very solid player here, 32, 33 years old. So as long as that steep drop off with his age doesn't come, you feel really good about your center spot. And then you got Dalton Risner, who joined this team after my Bengals deep dive last year, which felt like a huge addition at the time, and I think proved to be even more critical for them, where he actually played some of his best ball. We knew they needed a floor raiser on the offensive line, and Risner felt like that, but man, he had a really good year in both phases. He really fit this inside zone run game, just getting nasty, and something clicked in that sense. Whereas it maybe didn't in more of a wide zone oriented run game in Minnesota in the years before that. He's always been a very steady pass blocker, and that sustained last year. And for whatever reason, they were able to retain him for almost nothing here. Sometimes how the league views these offensive linemen just makes no sense to me. Try and explain, someone like Aaron Banks making $18 million, or Zion Johnson, Dylan Parham getting, $15 million or whatever they get. Dalton Risner gets 1 year, $3 million. The math ain't math in there. Risner's a better player than both those guys, and the Bengals get him on the cheap. So he's a really nice, I would still say floor raising piece. He's not a superstar, but God damn it, they needed that floor raising piece, because this was a huge question mark last year, not just with the uncertainty with Fairchild, but without Dalton Risner. You can start to see if you're looking at the graphic, they still this year have no depth. So really important that he's here. And then you have the most exciting piece on this offensive line, which is the biggest source of possibility for this O-line to go from very solid, 22nd in the NFL, a floor-raising unit that's not going to decommission this offense in the way that it has at times. They're already in a better spot with their floor on the O-line than it feels like they've been for a long time. But if they want to take another step forward and have real superstar talent here, Amarius Mims, proving that here in year 3, is their easiest path to doing it. And I would say their most likely path. I freaking love Amarius Mims. He does have to stay healthy. He's one of these guys that humans aren't supposed to be made like this, to be able to move like this and have long limbs and be 340 pounds. The physics of it, we see guys like this having more durability concerns, it feels like, than the typical person that feels like they were actually born of this earth. Because Amarius Mims was sent here on a spaceship, I think. I mean, this dude moves so well. He's got crazy length. He's strong as hell. And his technique just keeps getting better and better and better. He had a lot of ups and downs in his rookie season. There were still ups and downs in the first half of this year where he did take his losses just as a young, inexperienced offensive lineman, as you would expect, and not just in pass pro, but kind of missed assignments and falling off blocks in the run game. But in the final stretch, like, he was a big part of the Bengals run game coming together, and they were able to start kind of weaponizing him like we see around the league with guys like Penei Sewell and Darnell Wright. Like, him on the move, he just deletes guys. This is like some Trent Williams flashes in there with him. So if this is the first year where, like, he just hits the ground running and he stays healthy and he is, like, basically, if he can just be what he was for the final 6 weeks of the year last year, consistently and maybe a little bit better, because he's only gotten better every game he's played seemingly, he really could be in that category of the top superstar, like all pro level offensive lineman. And we're looking back at this and we're like, we're like, how the hell did the NFL let the Bengals get this guy in the middle of the first round? He's really exciting, man. The absolute definition of an up arrow player. Now, the depth here sucks. You have any injuries here and you're in trouble. You have no tackle depth. Cody Ford sucks, and he's probably the first guy in. The only guy I'm like somewhat interested in is Javon Foster, who was a early day 3 pick for the Jags that I thought looked like good at the Senior Bowl, but that's pretty much the best thing you could say about him, and he obviously didn't stick on the Jags. They're in trouble if either of these tackles go down, and they're also in trouble at guard. Like, Jalen Rivers had to play a little bit last year, and it was ugly for a rookie. Maybe he develops, but it was sure as hell ugly and looked like he had a long way to go last year. They did draft Brian Parker out of Duke. Not a bad day 3 pick. I think he knows what he's doing. He's relatively athletic. The technique isn't a problem for him. He did, though, have the lowest play strength grade for me out of the 27 offensive linemen that I watched. So I do think he needs more time to develop physically. And he is younger. You don't get a lot of even just like true seniors in the draft. Most of these guys are like 5th or 6th year players. So like, I think Brian Parker needs to bulk up. And maybe he's also your backup tackle as well, because that's what he played at Duke. But he has, he's below that 33-inch threshold. He probably, more of a short striding athlete, probably projected more as a guard, but like, not a bad 5th round pick. It's just hard to expect too much from him in year 1. I am actually really excited about Connor Lew as the eventual Ted Karras replacement. Lew was the highest upside center in this draft. I thought should have been a surefire day 2 pick. He also is a guy that needs to bulk up. He's very young. He's 21 years old, but he clearly moves really well. I think for a young center, he generally gets it. He got overwhelmed at times just being a young center playing in the SEC, but it's all there to develop. And I love having Ted Karras as a mentor there. He's just like coming off an ACL tear, and like, how long does he take to like get up to speed and like really put himself in the picture for playing time? It's unlikely that we see a ton of Connor Lew, obviously, especially if guys stay healthy, but I don't even know if he'll be the first guy in if we see an injury either. So like, I like the long-term projection a lot for Connor Lew. I thought that was really good value, but I don't know how much of an impact it makes on the 2026 Bengals. And that's really it for your O-line depth. So you are definitely in a better spot with this Bengals offensive line than last year, where we were really worried about it. You're not really worried about the O-line, which is good. It's more a like intrigue of, can Fairchild and Mims take another leap forward? And then all of a sudden, like, guys like Brown and Reisner, who for the most part like have had to be your best and second best offensive linemen, and Karras the third. Obviously, Mims finished the season as this team's best O-lineman and is rated as such now. But if you can get a full season where, like, all right, Brown, Karras, and Reisner are more like the ancillary, weaker links, so to speak, that's where you can really start to position yourself as one of the better offensive lines in the league. But that does round out the Bengals offense, who have some pretty crazy splits with how my formula spit these guys out. And I honestly think there's probably going to be some negative feedback on this, because I put it together and I was like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. But it's just how the math worked out. And I do like my formula. This is just one of those weird teams where it looks a little bizarre. But they came out as my 2nd ranked passing game, which I think makes sense. They did come out as my 29th ranked run game, which, as we rank these teams and units at their floor, I don't think is crazy. Like, I do think they showed that they can be better than that and finish the year strong. They were still 29th in total rushing yards last season. So we'll see kind of where they finish with the run game. I think if the offensive line takes some leaps forward, they certainly will be better than that. But they still came out as my third overall offense. Like, you would think second passing game, 29th run game, their overall offense would meet somewhere in the middle there. Well, that's because their passing game is, along with the number one ranked team, which I'm not going to spoil, like pretty leaps and bounds ahead of number 3. Whereas the run game is like really tightly knit in terms of the rankings. And I know we're getting pretty numbers nitty gritty here, but I think a lot of you will find this fascinating. There's a whole 3-point gap between the Bengals passing game and the third ranked passing game, 88.5 rating to 85.5. If you add 3 points to the Bengals run game rating of a 78.4, that would place them 14th in run game. So it's a much tighter cluster of run games, where the 29th ranked run game isn't too far off from our 20th ranked run game, for example. Whereas the Bengals really do pull themselves ahead with that passing game. So thought it was fun to kind of dissect the numbers a little bit there. But at the end of the day, we know this Bengals offense is going to be fucking awesome, right? Especially if the run game continues to build off of some of those late season, positive signs. I think everybody that clicked on this deep dive knows, well, yeah, Joe Burrow's got to stay healthy, and then this defense needs to get their freaking act together, right? So let's start talking about this defense, and if they can hold up their end of the bargain here, hit some of these green lights, in which case the Bengals have obviously so much potential to shatter this 17th power ranking, which even for me feels low. But we had to watch this defense last year. And while they made some big offseason changes, they still have a lot to prove on this side of the ball before this team can reach some pretty lofty expectations this season. So let's start on the defensive line, and we'll look at their offseason changes here with a defensive line that, to be fair, is probably the most improved unit in the NFL. Drawn a blank on some of those other ones that we've maybe talked about already in this series, but the Bengals defensive line is definitely up there. Obviously the big one, they trade the 10th pick in the draft for Dexter Lawrence, massive addition to their interior D-line, but that's not all they did. They also signed Jonathan Allen, drafted Landon Robinson in the 7th round out of Navy, and they didn't lose anybody either. So massively upgraded, emphasis on the massive in the case of Big Dexter Lawrence, but also very much upgraded at edge as well. Now, like, it's a hit on paper, right? Trey Hendrickson does leave. It's still a big loss, but Trey Hendrickson only played 26% of the snaps last year. They only got 6.5 games out of Trey Hendrickson last year. They still needed to fill those shoes as they headed into this season, but it's maybe not quite as big of a loss as you compare to last year's Bengals team, as obviously had he played the whole year, you could actually argue that losing Joseph Asai is a bigger impact in terms of what they got from those guys last year. Joseph Asai was kind of clicked last year and got a nice contract from the Jets. So, like, they did lose guys on the edge, but they did replace those guys. And at the end of the day, I actually still called this upgraded. It's a lot to ask. Like, those are some bigger names, right? But only 26% of snaps from Trey Hendrickson, and a Joseph Asai that is a good player, but a replaceable player, I think. The Bengals bring in Boye Mafe on a really nice free agent contract. They get a really nice day 2 value in a Cassius Howell. And they do get Shamar Stewart back into the mix here, who was their first round pick last year. Not everybody's favorite, not my favorite edge prospect, but I do think we've seen a few too many early victory laps on Shamar Stewart. And look, if 3 years from now we get to call Shamar Stewart a bust, I will wave my victory flag because I did not like that draft pick. But I'm also, able to sit back and be like, we still have to give him time. Like, he was a total project and was hurt last year. This is another chapter of the Shamar Stewart process here, and he's not even the biggest addition they made. I still think he's behind Mafe and Howell with Stewart coming back healthy, but I did say upgraded at edge as well. So this is what you're really hanging your hat on if you are a Bengals fan, saying this defense is going to keep us highly competitive this year. Now, they still got to come out and prove it, but you definitely like how this thing looks on paper much better. They came out as a top 20 defensive line for me, ranking 18th to 19th. Better from a run defense standpoint, though, than a pass rush standpoint. They ranked 24th to 28th for pass rush. And the pass rush grades again this year are especially a position group that so many of these teams feel low. But I think teams are really starting to understand how to prioritize pass rush and build around this unit. Like 24th to 28th maybe sounds a little low when you look at this group on paper, but then you start to really stack it up and you're like, no, that's actually probably about right. Now, D-line run defense, they did come in effectively top 5, 4th to 6th for D-line run defense. So it should be especially upgraded in that sense. And I think you obviously begin this whole conversation with Dexter Lawrence, who they trade for. They drop in as the glaring, hopeful new superstar face of this defense that has, let alone no superstar, they don't have a star. At least not in the public eye. DJ Turner's pretty nice, who we'll talk about. But the dream here is you are dropping not just a superstar game-changing player, but potentially one of the 3 to 5 definitive difference-making players from an X's and O's standpoint, because Dexter Lawrence changes the numbers for your entire defense. You have got to double-team this guy, simply put. And because he's a nose tackle, it's schematically a lot easier for teams to double him. And that's why his pass rushing impact hasn't consistently been transcendent. And I still think ideally you want another guy who can really capitalize on the fact that Dexter Lawrence is going to just suck up double teams. And the Bengals don't really have that. And that's a big part of why the Bengals are in that 24 to 28 range for pass rush for me. Still better than what they got last year, but that explains that a little bit. But there's still a huge schematic advantage for having to double, obviously in pass protection, but in the run game, maybe even more so. He just opens up so many opportunities, especially for your linebackers, but for other guys to get isolated in the run game, to have those one-on-one opportunities to get off blocks and make plays. He theoretically will open up and make everybody's job easier, and then also make his own impact on things, because it is impossible to keep 2 guys on him every time. And honestly, I would want to see the Bengals blitz a lot more, because a great way to make sure that Dexter Lawrence can get one-on-one opportunities is to be sending 5 and 6 guys, so that linemen have to come off of Dexter Lawrence, and then he's left one-on-one where he will kill you. And in the run game, naturally, guys will leave and climb to the second level and, different schemes. It's easier for Lawrence to find himself in one-on-one opportunities there, where his play strength is unparalleled. When he is dialed in, he is truly dominant. The true elite 3-down nose tackle. Now, he does have a yellow up and down arrow for me, because last season he wasn't quite the old Dexter Lawrence. I think we saw in moments that guy's still in there. There's been some buzz, depending just how deep in the weeds you start digging, that he played a little bit overweight. And honestly, I do think on tape he looked probably closer to 360, 370, which is kind of what I've heard he maybe played at last year, just unhappy with the contract situation and just unhappy in New York. And I think in terms of having that high motor, I think you see his sack total go from 10-ish to a half a sack. A lot of his pressure is he's not able to finish these sacks. Not that he's always been this great athlete in space, but there's definitely some moments where change of direction, quarterback's getting away and running away from him even more than normal. It did probably lead to a few sacks left on the table. But the thing is, you see him coming in here into Cincinnati. The vibes are immaculate. He seems happy as hell. There's some training camp clips of him maybe looking closer to that 335, 340 mark, which for him is a point where he can be a better athlete, be a better pass rusher, finish plays more, have better stamina, essentially play at what was a couple years ago a defensive player of the year type of at least candidate level. If the Bengals can get that guy back, that will almost single-handedly transform this defense. Now, if they get the guy that was the Giants' nose tackle last year, that will still transform this defense. It'll still make a massive impact and probably still be worth the number 10 pick in the draft. But ideally, you can get the peak of Dexter Lawrence as opposed to just a top 5 nose tackle in the NFL. 2 years ago, it was like, yeah, Dexter Lawrence, Chris Jones, top 2 with a bullet. Now it's a little bit more up in the air. But regardless, I love the addition. I love what he can hopefully do to raise up this defense that was essentially unwatchable last year. And you're hoping Al Golden too can capitalize on someone that gives you tremendous X's and O's advantages, but the better defensive coordinators are going to know how to leverage that compared to some others. So we'll see there. Now, the rest of this group, I love the depth. I even had a tweet that was like, man, the Bengals D-line is one of the deeper D-lines in the league. And I like that these guys will be fresh. You got some different skill sets. Again, a good defensive coordinator should be able to move these guys around, maximize their skill sets like a Mike McDonald does in Seattle, like a Brian Flores does, putting these guys in advantageous situations and getting good stunts and blitzes going and finding them one-on-one opportunities against matchup advantages, especially when you have this kind of cluster of like decent starting caliber guys. That's the idea. But you definitely don't have anybody else here where you're like, we're lining him up here and he's going to dominate, set it and forget it type. I think we will bounce out to the edge as we go through this group because Boye Mafe got a really nice free agent contract, $20 million a year, only 19 guaranteed. So it's a team-friendly deal for the Bengals where they can actually cut him for 0 dead cap. All the guaranteed money is this year. So it is $20 million a year, but certainly not the amount of money that was forked out to some other big-name pass rushers, guys like Owe and Jalen Phillips in free agency. And I think Mafe, to that extent, was a bit undervalued here and just a really nice signing for the Bengals. Now, Boye Mafe got to be the 3rd best edge on a championship defense in Seattle. That's, I think Mafe is a really nice number 2 in reality, but he's got to be your number 1. It's not an ideal starting point, and that does contribute to, again, the pass rush being more towards the lower end. Not to say he's not a nice addition, and not to say he can't make an impact here. He's got a really nice cross chop. He's got a good motor. He's athletic. He defends the run. He's a 3-down player, but there's going to be weeks where he disappears. He is, to me, a guy that, like, when the moves he has are working, he will impact games. There are tackles that can take away a cross chop that can match his athleticism, and Mafe kind of runs out of punches to throw. So I like bringing him in here. He's the definition of a floor raiser, just probably being tasked right now with having to be a little bit more than he ideally would be. But we'll see how much these other edge rushers can come in and help him out. Because, okay, if Mafe is like a legit kind of mid-range number 2, you can get by with that if you have a Dexter Lawrence and then you have a handful of other guys that can be also number 2s. Right now, you don't feel great about that here, but you have some potential to get there. Like, maybe some of that is in Myles Murphy, where the light kind of turned on for him last year. Former first-round pick, really struggled early on. But I think just became a little bit more familiar with what works for him at the NFL level. Like, the motor is good, the length is good, the power profile is good, and he was a pretty balanced player last year. He had some really good moments where the bull rush, like another kind of matchup-dependent player. Like, there are certain tackles that struggle to deal with his length and strength, but there's not really a whole lot else beyond that. He's going to set a hard edge and try to compress the pocket. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but the definition of a player that a good defensive coordinator can be like, I know what you do. We're going to have you, be in the disruptor on loops and stunts. We're going to have you compressing the pocket, setting a hard edge, put him in a position to succeed. I don't know that he's got another step forward. Technically speaking, it's possible. He has the traits. I'm not necessarily putting the green up arrow on him, betting on him to take another step forward beyond being like a nice number 3 piece. But at this point, you can put him out there and he's not a liability. It's these other 2 guys where we're really looking at like, okay, if Howell and Stewart can get closer to their upside sooner rather than later, we're doing just fine at edge with Mafe and the best case versions for Howell and Stewart, both very different young players. I'm going to start with Howell here because this is a really exciting pick and a big wild card for this team's success this season. Howell is undersized with brutally short arms, almost essentially lost him his chance of going in the first round just with the way NFL teams view these guys. There was maybe only a handful of teams willing to spend a first round pick on Howell, and they clearly didn't pull the trigger on him. He doesn't go that much later. He goes in the first half of the second round. But outside of being a little bit shorter and having short arms, this dude is a clinician of a pass rusher and really grew on me throughout the process. He's got a great first step. He's got excellent agility. He's bendy. He can bull rush you. That's what really stood out to me. If you think of the short arms and the lack of size, you would think he has no power profile. He does. He will, do it. It's not true speed to power like maybe Shamar Stewart is, where he's just going to get off the ball and get his hands on you and drive you back. It's more of like he'll set things up. Like I said, he's a clinician. He'll set things up with the inside moves, with the outside moves, the cross chop, the swipes, the Euro steps. It's all in there. But just as you're trying to match his agility, he gets up and under you and does have short, stocky, strong arms. He can win with a bull rush. So I really liked his tape. Traits do really matter at this position, and he doesn't have elite traits. So is it going to translate right away? Where does it kind of land? He's kind of a tough projection in terms of upside because I'm not going to say he has no traits. Like, he does have the athletic traits. It's just the length and size is lacking for sure. So we'll see like what his long-term upside is, but I would love to just see him be an impactful year one pass rush downs specialist, a designated pass rusher, and maybe be a guy that's good enough that you can consistently take Murphy off the field for later downs and get more consistent juice and one-on-one pass rush winning ability from a Cassius Howell. He's got to go out and prove it, but he's someone that I'm kind of betting on here, and I'm excited to watch. And I also think the Bengals, it's very fun to see if they won the draft in this sense, because the pick before him went another twitched up, undersized pass rusher in R. Mason Thomas, who I did not think was as good of a prospect as Cassius Howell. This is more just truly my take on it. But Cassius Howell, grew up a Chiefs fan. I'm excited. Like, there's a lot of a rivalry between those two teams. I'm excited to see if he plays with an extra chip on his shoulder because of that. So I'm very pro Cassius Howell. Just got to go out and prove it. Shamar Stewart, on the other hand, I'm not as much of a believer. Like, I do still think he'll get better. It's going to be hard for him to get worse. And in that way, I do have the green arrow pointing up on him. He just has no instincts at all. And like, if you could put Cassius Howell inside Shamar Stewart's body, that's like a Hall of Fame edge rusher. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Like, Shamar Stewart just doesn't know what he's looking for. He has no technique. Even against the run, it's like he can set a hard edge, but he doesn't really understand technique, leverage, run concepts. There's just everything for him to learn. It was evident on his college tape. It was evident in his first year. And you see the flashes, right? Like, it looked like this was going to be a win. He came out and had a great game against a bad Browns offensive line week one. And then he was horrible, and then he got hurt. So he should be healthy, and you should be able to get more from Shamar Stewart than he got last year. I think as a run defender and just a sledgehammer, if you can at least get him to consistently improve that first step and the hand placement, and at least have him just try to bull rush every time, you should still be able to get something from him, maybe in like a Bud Dupree career arc kind of way. And if that's a fourth piece that, again, I'm really beating a dead horse here, but a lot of pressure on Al Golden to show that he can take all these different unique skill sets, design a rushing plan, leverage these guys' individualized strengths that they do have, and help improve this pass rush from the coaching angle. I think that's really something important to watch. The rest of your edge depth, Cedric Johnson has played a little bit. He's been a decent run defender. I don't know how much he'll play here. Isaiah Foskey, what a terrible pick by the Saints. Powell Ryland coming out, had some athletic ability, but Johnson will probably make the team just as additional depth, and then that's probably it. Now, you also have a lot of depth on the interior of the D line, and I didn't really know who to put up as a starter next to Dexter Lawrence between Jonathan Allen and BJ Hill. I think it's going to be really close. I think it's pretty clear that BJ Hill will be the early down guy and Jonathan Allen will come in fresh on later downs. And that's a really nice rotation. That's probably the best way to get the most out of these guys later in their careers. Jonathan Allen, especially, he clearly is getting older. He had a really bad year in Minnesota last year relative to his expectations, and he's trending down. He was cheaper for a reason. But I will say this, they asked a lot of Jonathan Allen from a run defense standpoint where it just hasn't been his strong suit for a long time now. While he regressed last year, and it would not surprise anybody if he continues to regress, I actually put the yellow up arrow on him because I think in a more of a rotational role where he's just coming in fresh on third downs, getting ISO one-on-one reps as a 3-tech when Dexter Lawrence is getting double teamed next to him. I think Jonathan Allen could have a more efficient season and be a better player this year if utilized and rotated correctly by their defensive coordinator, Al Golden. Do I need to keep saying that? But it's all these guys, really. There's definitely a chance where Jonathan Allen can still finish with a good year or two in this setup, especially when you have a BJ Hill, who's the other complete side of the coin. BJ Hill is getting older, but he's like a fine wine. He maybe isn't getting better with age, but he's not regressing. He is absolutely a 3-down defensive tackle that's better on early downs than later downs. He, as a 3-tech, or even you can even play both ways here. I wonder if the defensive coordinator could get creative in a sense. You could actually have BJ Hill play the nose and force teams to leave Dexter Lawrence one-on-one a little bit more. There's possibilities here, right? Al Golden, step up, please. But yeah, BJ Hill is an early down presence, getting to stay fresh and healthy there. And then Jonathan Allen can be fresh and healthy for third downs. There's a lot of potential there, right? You also got TJ Slayton, who's another big-bodied veteran that's a one-trick pony, and probably not going to play as much with Dexter Lawrence here, but another player that can add some possibility to get out in certain odd fronts, open things up for Dexter Lawrence a little bit more. You got so many different chess pieces here if the defensive coordinator can leverage these guys correctly. And then you're really not done. I mean, Chris Jenkins, second-round pick out of Michigan, has been a major disappointment. It felt like he was one of the higher floor players in that draft, just as an athletic Michigan D tackle whose dad was the player he was. Chris Jenkins played the run with good technique at Michigan. It just felt like such an easy pick to make, even if he never really had pass rushing production at Michigan. But his lack of size has actually been a big issue for him. He hasn't been able to hold up, and you want to see him probably bulk up in the weight room. If he can do that and start to get into the mix here, he has really good potential to be maybe something like a BJ Hill. They don't need him to be that, which is nice. But there's still potential there, as there is with McKinley Jackson, who I'm pretty sure was that same draft, a third-round pick. Jackson, if anything, has actually played a little better than Chris Jenkins, and he actually got out there late last season and showed some good stuff as a run defender. So those are some interesting names as super deep depth. And then even Landon Robinson. All right, I'm gonna continue to beat the dead horse here. Landon Robinson is one of the most athletic defensive tackle prospects you'll watch. Crazy bend, crazy get off. He screams looping weapon for stunts and twists. I don't think he's going to step into the league and defend the run or really win a lot of one-on-one reps right away. I think he also really needs to bulk up. But if you can get creative enough, leverage the power rushing potential of guys like Myles Murphy and Shamar Stewart, the gravity of a Dexter Lawrence, to have another hyper twitched up unique chess piece in a Landon Robinson, simply to just loop around and take advantage of some of these other skill sets. I mean, seriously, Brian Flores, Mike McDonald, D'Amico Ryans, Robert Saleh, these guys would have a fucking field day with this D-line. I think that puts a lot of pressure on Al Golden to get more out of this group. We'll see. The potential is exciting. They just got to go out and do it. And obviously, this is a wild card unit for the Bengals with all the moving pieces, some older guys, Dexter Lawrence coming off the down year last year. You got some recent high draft picks that you need to step up. There's a whirlwind of possibilities, good and bad, for this Bengals D-line. At their floor, they still came out ranking 18th to 19th for me. This could be a top 10 defensive line in the league with the right development plus scheming up of these guys. You give that to this offense, you're really going to start to be in business here. So we'll see there. But that's not the whole picture. We unfortunately have to go to the second level of this defense. And unfortunately for Bengals fans, they did nothing at linebacker. Running it back with these young guys, Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter, who were the worst linebackers in the league last year and have to rank as the worst linebackers in the league again this year. I don't think this conversation needs to be that long, honestly. I think this is a really bad process by the Bengals to take a pair of, a second and a fourth round linebacker when we know these guys take years to figure it out. The Bengals should know better than that. They trotted these guys out last year and it was a freaking nightmare. They couldn't tackle anyone. They largely couldn't break down the run. They had no idea what they were looking for in coverage. It was like a vacancy in the middle of the Bengals defense. Now, did things get a little bit better as the year went on? Maybe. That's the nature of young guys playing and trying to figure out trial by fire. I'm still not confident in these guys heading into the year. Obviously, they are dead last across the board with linebacker run defense, linebacker coverage. They are the definition of a wild card unit because, theoretically, enough reps, these guys could settle in and just be okay. Can we just be the 27th worst linebacker room in the league if you're Cincinnati? You'll freaking take that, I think. But that's not where we're at right now. I mean, Demetrius Knight is closer to being good than Barrett Carter. Demetrius Knight has great athleticism. He plays with his hair on fire. He's got playmaking instincts. He's a former quarterback. He can see things develop and make stuff happen and have these really exciting moments. But there's really no discipline there. He's still got to get better at taking on blocks. He still has to understand better risk assessment and coverage. All the classic young linebacker stuff. I did put the up arrow on him. I tend to believe in him a little bit more. He was drafted first for a reason. He was a much better prospect. I think he played better. I think if he was next to, Devin Lloyd, Leo Chanel, Eric Wilson, insert any number of cheap veteran free agents that can be found, I would be so much more excited or at least confident in this group. But he's next to Barrett Carter, who was overdrafted as a fourth round pick. He's small, he's relatively heady, but he can't get there. He doesn't move well in coverage, still underdeveloped in terms of zone IQ. He can't really man guys up. He doesn't have the traits to do it. You can tell when they blitz him, he's not an explosive player. He's a career backup type, and to me always was. That was typecasted earlier on. I think he was a higher recruit coming out of Clemson, but just never really got better. I don't know, man. I feel like I was low on Barrett Carter as a prospect, and he largely played like I would have expected if you told me someone was going to draft Barrett Carter and make him their starting linebacker. Theoretically, he should get better, but I just don't know that there's a whole lot of a ceiling here either. So I'm not really ecstatic about him as the LB2. I really question this process by the Bengals. I always say linebacker doesn't really matter, but you can't be ass. You have to have at least guys that can finish tackles, sometimes get to the ball and get off blocks, and not be completely manipulated against play action and in coverage. There's a reason all of these teams are striving to just be adequate at linebacker. The Bengals aren't there right now. They're in the danger zone with these guys. So they got to get better and get better quickly, because you have Oren Burks, who I thought maybe would win a starting job here. And he did get out there in some of their base 4-3 stuff and played nowhere near like he did in that Super Bowl run for the Eagles. He played great under Vic Fangio and earned himself an opportunity here, but burned it quickly here in Cincy. Still probably a better option than Barrett Carter, but they're just going to go with the youth there. Joe Giles Harris had some playing time in Jacksonville like 4 years ago and created some intrigue, and he's kind of bounced around since. Maybe still a better option than Barrett Carter, but there's not really any upside with him. I understand just playing Barrett Carter and seeing if he gets better. Shaka Hayward maybe has some traits. Doesn't seem like, they're terribly high on him either. Eric Gentry was really a fascinating prospect. He's a true outlier prospect, and these guys just kind of fascinate me. You don't see a whole lot of 6'7" linebackers with 35-inch arms that ran a 4.6 40, but Eric Gentry is one of those guys. Realistically, his best maybe path to getting on the field and doing anything would be in a Kyle Hamilton type of role as a big nickel. Again, maybe there's something there. Maybe Al Golden wants to experiment with it, because as we'll look at the secondary in a second, it's not like their nickel position is anything close to proven. And with these linebackers, you might want a little extra size there. Doesn't feel like that's going to happen. We'll see if Gentry even makes the team. He cannot play between the tackles. Like, not only does he not know what he's looking for, and not only is he a twig at 6'7", he's 220 pounds. Like, he is like the easiest block for an offensive lineman. He will get pancaked. He will get driven back, consumed by the run. But that height works against him too. Like, he's just an easy target. So very unique player that a smart coordinator would maybe give an opportunity to figure something else out with a very hyper unique skill set. Cause he does actually have like some instincts in the alley to like make plays in coverage and use that length in a Kyle Hamilton type of way. Had to talk about him. I don't know that we'll ever see him play in the NFL, just like a truly unique undrafted free agent. But that's longer than I want to spend on this linebacker room. I mean, hoping for the best for these guys. I think Demetrius Knight will eventually get there one way or another, but he's already like a 26-year-old year two rookie. Essentially, these guys got to make me talk about them more. It was hard to watch, man, and they could really hurt this defense in many ways if they don't get better. But let's go to the Bengals secondary, because you kind of end on a more positive note here. We'll talk about their offseason changes, but I think this Bengals secondary is a pretty underrated unit with some hope as well, just like that D-line had. So as far as offseason changes, they're staying neutral for me at cornerback. They say goodbye to the ever inconsistent Cam Taylor-Britt. They drafted Takario Davis in the 3rd round, another draft pick that I just don't see it. We'll talk about him. At safety, though, you have one of the true addition by subtraction losses in Geno Stone, who was one of the worst starting players in the league, who we had to witness play 93% of snaps last year. I just had like a reflex, like about to throw up, just remembering having to watch Geno Stone play last year. So if they just got rid of him and just put like your grandma out there, it'd be about the same. But they do sign Brian Cook to a pretty hefty free agent contract to come in from Kansas City. And then they did add Kyle Duggar. We'll talk about what he looks like these days. But it is upgraded at safety, which is good. So the Bengals secondary is the 3rd and final wild card unit for this wild card of a defense. They got to figure things out here as well, but there's a lot of potential and stuff to like here. And they did come in, I think, what is this, our 3rd straight deep dive with a secondary coming in with their coverage grade in that big middle cluster. It's like pass blocking and DB coverage. There's these just clusters of like 9 teams that are the actual definition of mid, like what mid is supposed to mean, where it's like, it's fine, it's solid, but not going to stand out to you. But I did say in the Vikings deep dive, amidst this cluster, you have some teams that have certainly more upside than others to kind of climb out of this middling cluster. And I think the Bengals are one of them, where you can definitely see a path for this to actually be more of a top 10 secondary. But they got to hit some green lights here. And that starts at cornerback. Now, their number 1 corner is a really nice player who did have a breakout season last year, realistically made himself a bunch of money last year, but if he follows it up, we know cornerback's a volatile position. DJ Turner was someone I made an all-pro list last year, it's really hard to make an all-pro list because you end up having to snub like really good players. But DJ Turner was like firmly in the conversation for who had an all-pro season at cornerback last year. And if he can follow that up at a volatile cornerback position, like he is going to get north of $25 million a year, like probably like a JC Horn type of contract. He was awesome. And his game against the Packers, probably the most memorable, dominant cornerback game I've seen in like 3 years of tape. It was, I know it sounds crazy to say that because it's DJ Turner, but Bengals fans know what I'm talking about. And go get yourself an NFL Pro subscription. Just watch DJ Turner's passing plays against the Packers. There's going to be like 30 plays and you'll see it. You'll be like, oh, holy shit. Like, yeah, that dude has speed, ball skills, anticipation, quick footedness to match route breaks, just special. And it wasn't just that game. Like he played at a very high level. And if you have consistent coverage tape and a single individual like dominant performance like that, and his game against Pittsburgh was really special too. Was it DK Metcalf? He ripped an interception, ripped out of the hands to have an interception. But if you have a couple like standout performances on top of just steady coverage tape, you're going to be in the all-pro mix. And that's where DJ Turner was. Now, his first 2 years were more up and down. So it's kind of a like, not a prove it year, but kind of a like, I guess, litmus test type of year of like, all right, are you a $25 million a year corner or a $19-20 million a year corner if you come back down to earth a little bit? But either way, I feel really good about DJ Turner as the number one corner heading into the year. And the Bengals should too. We'll see if they're able to keep him long term. Because if he has another great year, they might not be able to. But then you have Dax Hill, who I've had a lot of tweets about Dax Hill. Probably one of the most under the radar, underrated players at this point in time, assuming he is who I think he is. And he still has the green up arrow for me. I love him as a full-time outside cornerback, but he still doesn't have like a full year of great tape at outside corner. Now, they finally made the switch to put him there late last season after, in my opinion, a questionable Al Golden decision where like, okay, we kind of know who Dax Hill is at this point. He was drafted as a nickel corner at Michigan. They tried him to be the Jesse Bates free safety replacement. That's not really his game. He's not really overly instinctive or nasty or consistent in the nickel. But when they've stuck him at outside corner, I've consistently compared him to Byron Jones, who, God, it's crazy. It feels like our younger audience maybe doesn't know who Byron Jones is. But he was a freak athlete, played some safety, didn't really stick until like year 4 or 5, or maybe it was a couple years sooner than that. But when he actually played outside cornerback, where just his athletic traits and his man-to-man, or at least like ability to turn and run with guys and find the ball, made him a kind of Pro Bowl caliber cornerback for a few years. And that's kind of been the same story with Dax Hill. You load up Dax Hill's outside corner tape in the final like 8 weeks of the season, he was playing at a Pro Bowl level. It's just we only got about a half season of that. He's said he wants to play outside cornerback. I hope Al Golden doesn't mess around here and sticks him at outside corner, and that's the end of it. It seems that's the way we're going to go. He's a massive breakout candidate. I don't know if I'm going to get to my top 10 list of breakouts before the season starts. I would love to be able to get that in. Spoiler alert, Dax Hill is going to be quite high if I do make that video. But he was always an interesting prospect in that sense where he is 6 foot tall. He has those oily hips, the fast feet, easy acceleration. He was an amazing man corner from the slot in Michigan's defense, but they just haven't been able to like really leverage that until he's played more outside corner in the league. And I mean, there are moments, especially when you see him like anticipate hitch routes and like start to understand what offenses are trying to do to him, which is only going to get better with more reps. There are moments where you're like, oh yeah, that's one of those like Christian Gonzalez, Trent McDuffie, like those true freak corners that check all the boxes, not just the long speed, but the foot speed, the hip fluidity, the change of direction, you name it, to be like legitimate shutdown type of athletes out there, for whatever that word means in today's NFL, where you're still going to get beat with the way passing games are today. But anyway, really excited for year 2 of Dax Hill. And if he can really prove that he is that level of cornerback, you have one of the best cornerback duos in the NFL this year, and I don't think it's unlikely that that's what happens here. I really don't. I think this is an incredibly underrated duo. Very few people are going to talk about the Bengals and say they got some great cornerbacks. It's really just the people that are paying attention. Now, outside of those two, you still have a lot of question marks. And even Dax Hill himself needs to prove all of that. But like, I look at slot corner and it's a 30-year-old Jalen Davis, and I'm like, damn it, Bengals, like you were so close. Maybe Jalen Davis proves to be a late career breakout, played his ball at Utah State. And I remember him coming out as like an interesting day 3 kind of maybe flyer on a nickel corner. And crazier things have happened than Jalen Davis, who played like 300 snaps in the nickel last year and had some good moments. Like, crazier things have happened than him turning out to be a pretty good player. It's possible. I guess that color me slightly intrigued, but I really wish there was a better option. And a part of me is still freaking terrified that the Bengals are going to repeat their mistakes. If Jalen Davis struggles or gets hurt, that they're going to repeat their mistakes and be like, oh, sorry, Dax, you're going back into the nickel. And it's like, no, like, get a freaking nickel corner, please. Because Josh Newton's not that guy. He's been what you probably expected if you watch Josh Newton's college tape. He's big and can be like a decent backup as a perimeter outside corner. But yeah, if Jalen Davis goes down, your likely reaction to that is probably, sorry, Dax, you got to go play nickel so that Josh Newton can step outside. DJ Ivey has played a little bit. Jasir Taylor's played a lot of it and didn't look good. He would probably be your next nickel option. Maybe he's figured things out later in his career. But you just don't have a lot of like nickel options after Jalen Davis, and Jalen Davis himself isn't a great nickel option. Now, Takario Davis is a 3rd-round pick who comes in here. Another guy that if you don't stick with Jalen Davis, you're probably sticking Takario Davis outside and saying, go get him in the slot, Dax. I would have so much rather they took that 3rd-round pick and spent it on a nickel option. Like, man, if this team added Jalen Kilgore or even Keontae Scott, Jaden Kennedy out of Oregon, and made them an intriguing slot option, I would be so much more on board with those as picks. Takario Davis, to me, I mean, the best case is a player that Bengals fans are familiar with, and that's what Trey Flowers was for them. And Al Golden was there when they did the Trey Flowers like tight end eraser thing. And if it's truly like, if you're in a position to spend a 3rd-round pick on a hyper specialized role player, that's great. The Bengals aren't in that position. Like, they need to draft starters with 3rd-round picks. And Takario Davis can't fucking move. Like, he's a tree. He has no reaction time. If you run a dig or a hitch, like, he can't throttle down and stop it. And like, what's funny is he played a bunch of like off-zone quarters in Washington's system, and like technically like his length plays in a quarters assignment. The Bengals ran the least cover 4 in the NFL last year. So like, I don't even like the scheme fit. I'm strongly betting against this player. I just am. I would love to be wrong. I thought his teammate Ephesian Prysock was a much better player. So I don't see it. I'd be surprised, but they did draft him pretty high. So the cornerback room obviously is far from perfect when you don't even have like 3 solidified starters there, especially with Jalen Davis in the nickel. And then you got your safety room, which like, okay, Brian Cook, great, like floor raising signing. He's slow back there. He's gotten more instinctive in coverage and like really settled in Spags' defense and like became, I think, a little bit more of a confident playmaker back there. We saw his ball production ramp up. So maybe the risk assessment a little bit better, but like he's not very athletic. He's not going to have the range or man-to-man coverage ability back there, but he's a right place, right time type of safety. He's a steady tackler, a floor raiser of a balanced starting safety. I get why they wanted to pay that money when this is their room. They needed something here to just set it and forget it. And that's exactly what Brian Cook is. Not a particularly exciting player, in my opinion, though. And that's your kind of starting point. Like, after that, you still have question marks. Jordan Battle is a player I like. He's heading into year 4 and hasn't really proven himself as a consistent coverage player. And even the run defense has been a little bit more up and down. Missed tackles especially have kind of come and gone with him. but I still like him. Played a bazillion snaps at Alabama, theoretically can run any sort of coverage as a sort of balanced split safety. Big fourth year for him. It really is. I put the up arrow on him. I'm kind of buying into him, but he just hasn't been consistent enough, and he's given up a lot of big plays in coverage. He has, so you got to cut that out. You really do. And if honestly, like if he struggles, they're probably just going to struggle through it with him because you don't really have anybody else. You have Kyle Duggar, who, I mean, they have to have plans for that tight end eraser like they used to have in 2020, 2021, because that's all Kyle Duggar can do. And he can't even erase tight ends, but he's big and can theoretically do that. Kyle Duggar, ironically, might be this team's best linebacker. If you just made him your starting green dot middle linebacker, he might be your best player there. But he has really fallen off. Injuries have caught up with him. He's been unplayable at times. Was rough to watch for the Steelers. Big name, but a regressing vet that was cheap for a reason. Dajon Anthony's a developing, day 3 dart throw that we have hardly seen play here. Russ Yeast is like Geno Stone all over again. It's like, okay, he's played, but he hasn't played well, probably just depth and special teams, and then you got some undrafted types. So there's some high-end stuff with this secondary that I really like, that uplifts the intrigue, that gets them into that more like middle-ranging secondary for me. But this can definitely be a weak link position group. And if you're not getting good coverage on the back end and you got problems in the slot, and maybe even Dax Hill isn't what I think he is as an outside corner, because it's far from proven, although I really trust my eyes with the tape with him out there. This is a wild card unit, right? This could go in a lot of different directions, and they got to go get it done, obviously, just like the rest of this defense does. So naturally, this series ranks these players and units at their floor, and there's so much unproven with this Bengals defense that they can't come in ranked that high on this side of the ball. Not after what we watched last year. A lot of these offseason changes are nice. There's still some existing issues from last year. They came out as my 29th ranked defense, which is admittedly better than what we had to watch last year. 30th in pass defense, 26th in run defense. They actually got a higher rating, though, for the pass defense. C+ pass defense, C for run defense. There's just more depth in terms of NFL pass defenses. And ultimately, if you think the 17th power ranking is too low, and I'm not saying you're wrong, we're going to talk about my actual predictions for the Bengals here in just a second, but I've got my process for this series. This is what takes them down a few spots, is all the questions on defense. They got to hit their green lights here. If Al Golden's good, if the D-line comes together and the secondary comes together, this could be an okay defense, like middle of the pack. I think there's a lot of upside here. I like a lot of the stuff they did. This could be in the probably 15 to 20 range if everything goes right. And if that happens and Joe Burrow stays healthy, yeah, dude, it's going to be a freaking really exciting, like, playoff caliber football team. So believe me, I understand the excitement of the upside of this Bengals team. I do. Now let's talk a little special teams here before we inch closer to our interview with Joe Goodberry. No roster changes with the Bengals special teams, running it back with their core specialists, which is going to be Evan McPherson at kicker, Ryan Rakow at punter, and Charlie Jones. And the Bengals actually rated out really well for like the team grades. So I have this formula that utilizes a bunch of different more like objective metrics and the PFF team grade, which also factors in like kick coverage and, not fumbling and that kind of stuff. The Bengals were 4th in PFF team grade for special teams. DVOA had them 6th. So really good baseline there with how they're coaching things up. Evan McPherson, I take a 2-year moving average. He's honestly a bit of a wild card because he has literally been a roller coaster chart in his career. Amazing, bad, amazing, bad, amazing, bad. Unfortunately, last year he was amazing. So do we get a bad year from Evan McPherson, or can he buck this trend? Like, that's fascinating to me. The 2-year moving average left him as the 18th graded kicker. So still a B- grade there. They came in 22nd at punter. And then Charlie Jones, just very solid returner. Middle of the pack there. And this all leaves the Bengals as the 12th projected special teams for next season. So pretty good in that sense. One more thing here before we turn to the interview with Joe Goodberry. I want to do my recap with my Venn diagram of strengths, weaknesses, and those all-important pivotal factors. The Bengals are a uniquely constructed team here, where they have some definitive strengths, a couple weaknesses, and a pretty hefty list of those pivotal factors. I don't need to tell you, but the strengths are quarterback and pass catchers. Surprise, surprise. The weaknesses are linebacker. You cannot argue with that. And this one's more debatable, but run blocking. I think on paper, compared to the rest of the league, they still have a lot to prove. But with the right development, they can definitely dig themselves out from that being a weakness. I'm much less worried about that than I am with linebacker. But you have all these wild cards, right? Things that could be weaknesses or be more strengths. And then you have Joe Burrow's health that shows up in there as well. That's an obvious wild card for this team this year. But what happens with this D-line, with everything we broke down, kind of this whirlwind of ups and downs and how they can be used? And that ties into the defensive coaching with Al Golden. Can he prove to actually be like a defensive mind that can elevate things on that side of the ball? Which honestly, like, there were years where that's what Lou Anarumo was, right? A guy that actually elevated an average roster. It would be great to feel like you have that guy in Al Golden. And especially with, scheming guys up and putting guys in the right position with the D-line, like I spent so much time highlighting, that really matters. I think there's a lot of pressure on Al Golden to figure out a good pass rush plan here, and for that to be something that he does well as a defensive coach. Linebacker is a wild card. You got two really young players. If they start to figure things out, maybe some of the good stuff we saw at the end of the year last year starts to build. Okay, can it be less of a weakness? Maybe. Secondary, definitely a wild card, as we broke down. It mostly ties to this defense, though, right? It is everything defense related, and can the quarterback stay healthy? If those two things happen, if you hit green lights with those things, we are cooking with gas in Cincinnati. A pretty volatile team in that sense, which makes sense why they come in smack dab in the middle of the deep dive series, I think. But before I end the video with my actual predictions on what I think with the Bengals, not my preseason power rankings, but my win predictions and that kind of stuff, we are going to roll this incredible interview with Joe Goodberry, someone I think Bengals fans are very familiar with, who I'm excited to welcome to the channel here. And then we'll come back looking at their schedule and my final predictions for this team. All right, I am now super thrilled to welcome our very first ever Bengals guest for the Deep Dive series. We have Joe Goodberry here. Joe just made the big announcement. He's going full-time covering the Bengals and ball talking. So, Joe, before we get started, let the good people know where they can find your stuff.
The best place is on any social media, but Twitter is my main, at Joe Goodberry. But you can find me on the Locked On Bengals podcast. And if you're interested in some film reviews on YouTube, look up Bengals on the Brain.
Awesome. So for my first question here is about Zach Taylor, and it kind of just hit me. We were talking a little bit before the show that we were talking about being full-time, and I think I started 2019, which was when Zach Taylor started. I'm like, dang, it's been a long time with Zach Taylor as the head coach of the Bengals here. But I wanted, from your perspective, someone that's pretty dialed into the beat of the Bengals and their fans. Where are Bengals fans kind of at with Zach Taylor? There's definitely kind of a public perception that, he's kind of carried a little bit maybe by Joe Burrow and the Jamar Chase of it all. But where Bengals fans are at with him, and maybe more importantly, where do you think the Bengals are at with him? And could this be maybe more of a hot seat season, or maybe is the pressure not so big?
So I would say the majority of Bengals fans see Zach Taylor the way the National Football fan does, is that he is just a guy, and that their success is largely dependent on Joe Burrow staying healthy, Joe Burrow being a god in critical moments, and Jamar Chase doing awesome things, right? And I don't think that's totally untrue. I think they're large part, when you have players of this caliber, you should design everything about your team and your offense around them. And I think the Bengals have done that. If I were to defend Zach, I would say not every coach knows how to use their guys, and they get these top 5 picks, and you wonder why Kyle Pitts only has 600 yards receiving. The Bengals have done a great job, especially on the offensive side. So that's why I'm saying Zach. Pretty much everybody that they have drafted has worked out, and other than Jermaine Burton, which we know why he didn't work out, and the red flags were there, right? Everyone else is used exactly. If you were to evaluate them, how should T. Higgins be used? That's how they use them. How should Jamar be used? That's how they use him. How should Chase Brown be used? That's like everyone. Everyone has worked out from an offensive skill points. Look at Drew Sample versus Mike Gesicki at tight end. They understand the strengths of the two guys and they use them accordingly. Now, could they do more scheme-wise? Could they draw some things up, put more easy buttons into this offense? Yes, I think they can. And I think that is a focus of theirs. Not many coaches get this long of a leash in order to finally implement these type of things. But when they're talking about it so heavy this offseason, I think the pressure is mounting a little bit. So if we're saying how does the organization feel about him? I think they have to keep Burrow healthy and get into the playoffs. I don't look at it from the negative perspective going into this year. I expect Burrow will be healthy. I expect that the team around him is good enough to get them in the playoffs this time around. And if that's the case, I think we're more likely talking about an extension for Zach Taylor, because at the very least, we know that with Burrow and Taylor, if healthy, that's a top offense with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, all that. But that's a top offense. And if they can figure the defensive side out, it's a good enough team to be a pain in the butt in the playoffs at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also wanted to ask you a little bit about the defensive coaching side of things. Al Golden gets hired as the DC last year and was, a little bit of a kind of a wild card hire, like coming mostly from the college ranks. He had spent a couple of years under Lou Anarumo before Notre Dame. I don't know if there was anything in between that or not. I don't think so. But I'm curious what kind of stood out to you, whether it's like his coaching style, whether you liked him or not, some things he was doing schematically, and maybe like what was different from what Lou did, if anything, I suppose.
Yeah, because Lou really won us over. In the beginning, 2019, 2020, we really weren't sure. He really became known for his playoff schemes and really limiting the good quarterbacks like Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen in the playoffs, right? Doing a lot of disguise, really seamlessly showing one thing pre-snap and then changing it post-snap and really getting quarterbacks to hold the ball.
Yeah.
And Al Golden was there for that. And a lot of the defensive packages for third downs and blitz packages were Al Golden's responsibility when he was with the staff. So we were excited about that idea. We thought it may have been a shallow search because Golden kept his house in Cincinnati. Apparently he's a neighbor of Zach Taylor, and it always seemed like he was going to be the hire. So it's like, how deep did you actually look for a guy? We're trying to win a Super Bowl here. But on the other hand, we could see why this decision was made. He understands the Bengals, understands how they operate. And if Zach's comfortable with them, go ahead. Let's see. Not a lot was different. The biggest weakness that I thought Golden had in the first half of the year, because it's almost two different conversations, what they did the second half of the year versus first half. In the first half, I thought they were just far too passive, not really pulling the same strings and levers that Lou would on third downs. Instead, weren't disguising their coverages as much. Turns out, Al has talked about it afterwards, said he was really trying to get the guys to understand what he was trying to do. They weren't getting it, right? So he had to make that change halfway through the year and go from a read and react type defense to just an attack style. And let's see where the chips fall, right? And that worked out much better. They have enough high draft picks and premium picks on that defense. Even though it's been a bad defense, these are guys with talent that if you can unleash them a little bit, maybe they'll make some plays, right? So that improved their defense from one of the worst we've seen in modern football through the first half of the year to at least respectably bad in the second half. Now, I will say one of the things that he did scrap also was their stunts and twists up front on the defensive line, their games up front just did not work. And I think he thought he'd have Trey, and Trey ended up getting hurt, and then we didn't see him the rest of the year. So he had to really throw that out. They went to more of a 3-4 defense. They always did that with Lou and mixed it in. They were very multiple defense under Lou, but they really leaned into it in the second half of the year. And that defense started to look more like Lou's in the second half down the stretch as they played some poor teams like the Cardinals, Dolphins, and Browns. So it should look better. I would say we're mildly hopeful, but at the same time, Al Golden and his defense is probably still the biggest question we have. Is he a good coordinator? You might have enough talent now to float, but are you actually good? We have to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why like most of the questions I prepped for this are like on the defensive side of the ball. You kind of said it, like we know what they're going to be doing offensively with those guys. Let's talk a little bit about the Dexter Lawrence acquisition. One of the many blockbusters showing up in the headlines on the field and off in the NFL news cycle this year. But yeah, they go trade the number 10 pick for Dexter Lawrence, who did have a little bit of a down year last year. So I'm curious, just now that he's a Bengal, like how much have you kind of dug into the down year from last year? I know I had heard some rumblings that potentially he was like really upset with not getting a contract extension with the Giants. Maybe was a little, didn't take that so well. Maybe was a little bit out of shape. I don't know how much truth there is to that. If you even want to touch on that, if you've heard anything about that, but also just like going back, watching his film, like what have you seen? Like, was it a down year on the film, or was it actually like, no, he actually wasn't really having a down year. He was still Dexter Lawrence. He just maybe had some bad sack luck, or like the PFF run defense grades dropped off. Those can be a hot debate as well, whether those are accurate or not. So yeah, what have you seen and heard kind of going back to Dexter's down year?
So yeah, we heard the same things that he wanted out of New York, right? Some of it was framed as tired of the losing, tired of the not having a clear direction, right? But yeah, a lot of that can be solved with money we see at the professional level and I guess now college. But yeah, so those things could be smoothed over, and they weren't in New York. And I thought he looked a little heavier last year on tape.
Yeah.
But now, like seeing him, he looks rejuvenated. Like everyone's talking glowingly. They said he never left. They traded for him. He got there. They didn't leave. He didn't leave. He's been working out every day. He was at voluntary stuff. They said he looks like he's in great shape. He's all the videos getting posted of him doing these drills. I remember seeing that before. He looks like he's ready to go. Like he wants to reclaim his title as one of the elite defensive tackles in the league. But I went back and watched the film too, because you get a half a sack on the stat sheet and it's like, whoa, are we trading the 10th pick for this guy? Still, this is the guy that plays the most nose tackle snaps in the entire league. And for him to get the pressures he does, it's an impressive feat, because when I'm watching him, he is still, even with the edge help that the Giants brought on, the focal point, because he will wreck your offensive line and your protections. And he's right in the middle of the protection. Like, I think every team's looking at it like, this is where we start and we'll figure out the rest. So he gets doubled at an extremely high rate. All the data says that as well, because when you don't double him, it's almost like the light bulb flicks and he turns on and he's like, boom, this is my chance to win. So he almost bided his time as he's getting doubled in some of this film I'm watching, and he's just waiting and hanging out. And I'm like, yeah, I'd like a guy to be a little bit more aggressive here, maybe anchor a little bit better on double teams, really get your face in there. That's kind of like a young nose tackle or a guy that's really trying to make his name. And Lawrence is kind of like, I'll wait until they single me. And soon as they do, he beats them and beats them bad. Yeah. It was almost comical to like, whoa, I can't believe he can still move at that speed on it. And even still, like, guys can't move like that at nose tackle. And I thought the elbow bothered him at times. He didn't lean on that side as much, but otherwise he was agile, quick, strong, and aggressive when you one-on-one him. And he missed a lot of his sacks. When it came time to break down and convert that into a sack, which is a big thing, he missed a lot of it. So I wondered if he was getting stiffer, more, not as agile as he used to be. Is he just going to be more of a disruptor than he is a finisher? But he was getting into a lot of these plays by himself. Surprisingly, despite the edge production they had last year in New York, I thought he was still good, is the conclusion. Like, I watched the tape and I'm like, yeah, I think if he's motivated, if you can get him to fire at more than just waiting for the single blocks, and even then, if you just took those, it's still solid production. But if you can get him motivated to play at a higher rate, higher level, even more, or maybe even reduce his snaps a little bit. And that's why I like the signing of Jonathan Allen and keeping BJ Hill, keeping TJ Slayton, because that's like 4 deep of guys you can play with. I think you could find a much more motivated Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah, I'm fired up about the addition. I think it was big time and kind of everything they needed. So I kind of see your face light up talking about him. I'd be pretty stoked too.
Yeah, it was fun film, ridiculous film, to be honest, at times.
Yeah, especially if he was a little bit out of shape and still doing that stuff. It's like okay. I guess we'll shift back to the offense for a second here with my next question about the offensive line. Just kind of what's your confidence level in this group, even just like a 1 to 10 scale confidence level. And then just kind of a quick breakdown of like what guys maybe you trust the most, or maybe what guys you have some concerns or need to see some green lights on.
Yeah, this is a big conversation because it's been a huge conversation for a long time. If you're a Bengals fan, or even if you're just, I think national media picked up on it the year the Bengals went to the Super Bowl 2021, one of the worst offensive lines we ever see get that far. And they were within maybe a half a second to a full second of pass protection to maybe winning or taking the lead with just seconds left in the game. So to get that far, the focus was really on the O-line. We talked about it to the extent of I don't ever want to get back to that, to be honest with you. But in 2022, they signed a bunch of free agents. Ted Karras and Alex Kappa and Lael Collins. Karras is still here. Kappa was serviceable. Collins got hurt again. The following year, they go Orlando Brown at left tackle. They have drafted Amarius Mims in the first round, Dylan Fairchild in the third round at guard. And now they have the same 5 starters as what they ended with last year, inserting Dalton Risner into right guard. After about 6 plays, Lucas Patrick got hurt. Risner had to go in, and he pretty much bounced around between left guard and right guard when he was healthy. But from left tackle to right tackle, first I'll say my confidence, if you don't know, if you're not a Bengals fan and you're listening, you may still think the line is bad. There's a lot of advanced metrics that look at the entirety of the season, and it doesn't paint them in a great picture. At the week 4 point, I tweeted out after watching the film, this is the worst offensive run blocking scheme I've ever seen in my life. Like, and not hyperbole. It was that bad. And they ended up the season number 1 in EPA per rush, number 3 in success rate. Like, to go from as bad as I've ever seen to, whoa, this is really efficient. I'm telling you the leaps. So if any of the metrics taken those first 6 or so weeks, it's really weighing them down for what they ended up being in terms of run blocking and the pass protection, markedly better in a lot of ways. And if you go in and watch it and say, like, all right, if they're bringing back the same 5 starters, what should it be? I'm like a 7 out of 10 for my confidence, because I am a little bit, I should say 9 because of what it's been, but like looking at an NFL scale, let's say 7, just above average. From left tackle, Lando Brown Jr. has been a very steady, durable starter in his career. Not the most athletic guy, right? But massively huge, has a good personality. He seems to be a very smart player. When he gets beat at times, you're just like, what happened, Orlando? Like, why? What, did your feet just stop moving? Like, why'd you miss that? You should be a big, strong dude. It happens. He probably gave up the most sacks on the team last year, but he was still had about 6 games where he pitched shutouts. And it's like, if we can get those, I'm really not too upset. Left tackles are getting paid like crazy in the league for average play. So I'm okay with him. If I were to put a number on him, he is a 7, representative of the entire line. Left guard, Dylan Fairchild started as rookie. Great rookie class at guard last year. Fairchild probably got lost in that a little bit. Gray Zabel got a lot of the headlines, Tyler Booker, and there were others, Donovan Jackson. But Fairchild was really good. He is probably their best run blocker of the 5. Very strong wrestler background, very good grip, very, very good core strength, understanding balance and body positioning. I thought he got markedly better getting to the second level and getting the linebackers. His pass protection only gave up 2 sacks. One of them, he got hurt on one of them. He just couldn't get his leg out there. He missed the next few games. Dalton Risner got inserted. So, like, I really don't blame him for that one. And he got so much better throughout the year. The entirety of the offensive line did. But he went from solid rookie to this is a good level starting guard. Like, as a veteran, as anybody, I was really happy with the way Fairchild progressed. If he's got another step in him, he might be a borderline Pro Bowl or just a good player that gets a good contract in the future. Ted Karras, one of the better pass protecting centers in the league. He's one of the older players in the league as well. He's the oldest player on the Bengals, I think, now, other than Joe Flacco, oldest starter for sure. And he's basically given up 1 sack last year, 2 sacks the previous years. If you go to PFF, he's one of the highest true pass blocking graders at center over his time in Cincinnati. Really good communication and flow with Joe Burrow on picking up blitzes and calling things out. They work well together. Not a great run blocker, just okay. Not a great athlete, not overly strong. Got decent size for that position. He's acceptable. He's probably another 7 on this offensive line. Dalton Risner had one of his best years of his NFL career with the Bengals. He was never been a good run blocker, right? That's always been the thing about him. Good pass protector, grades really well in like true pass sets on PFF and things like that. Run blocking always stunk. Like Vikings fans were telling us, Broncos fans, run blocking stinks. He was great for the Bengals in run blocking. I don't know what, but he and Scott Peters, the offensive line coach, James Casey is now the run game coordinator, who's the tight end coach. You might remember him if you were doing draft prospects 15 years ago. James Casey out of Houston, I think, smaller H-back type tight end. But he's now the run game coordinator. Whatever worked, it worked with Dalton Risner. And he was a very good pass protector still. Like, I'm happy with that. And the Bengals got him for like $1.5 million again this year. So the league disrespected him again. We'll take it. Marius Mims at right tackle. Potential to be a budding star. He has been, progression is not linear, right? You hear that all the time. Guys just don't continue to get better. It's not. We always assume, they'll only be better. You'll hear fans
it's not
say.
Madden.
But really, it's like this, right? And hopefully you're ending on a curve that's going up. Mims has been directly this. The more he plays, the more we see him, the more aggressive he gets, the stronger he gets, the more he's affecting players with how big his hands are and how heavy he hits. And he is a one-speed guy from the outside when you're watching him. He's calm. He's cool. I'm not sure he sweats. Like, he's just chilling. He's going to get, you can put on TJ Watt. He's chilling. Like, Mims looks cool as hell in there, knocking hands down, letting them, get inside of him, absorbing them, just dropping TJ Watt down. I'm not saying he's blanking him or pitching shutouts, but that's as good as I expect it to look against a guy that has won Defensive Player of the Year and can cause a lot of chaos. I think Mims, if he continues that trajectory, we'll be talking about him as a top 3 right tackle in the league, and maybe more than that. Like, he potentially could, now that Tristan Wirfs, Penei Sewell are playing left, we could come out of this year and say Amarius Mims is the best right tackle in football. And I don't think that's crazy, because everyone has always said his upside is extremely high, and we have tangible film of him just absolutely getting better.
Absolutely. All right. Nailed it. I especially agree on Mims, man. He's so fun to watch. And the trajectory as well, like you said, totally just straight up. Okay. Who is your pick to be third in receiving yards on this team? They kind of have this interesting, motley crew of ancillary weaponry.
Yeah. They want 190 targets to go to Jamar Chase, right? And that's with him missing a game last year, being suspended. I mean, I think he could hit 200. The offense flows through him. And I think they'd like to get T to 120 or 120 plus if they can get him for 17 games. Yeah. So a lot goes to them, and it's fed through them as it should be, right? If you have these weapons, why would you not throw to them as often as you do? Now, right, that brings up the question, who is wide receiver 3? Who is target 3? If you had to pick somebody up in a super deep fantasy league, who could be the guy?
Yeah.
Andre Iosivas is wide receiver 3. But Mike Gesicki plays just as much as he does, and he is basically a wide receiver as well, even though he's labeled as a tight end. I want to say 88% of his snaps, they throw the ball. 91 to 92% of his snaps, his alignment is either in the slot or out wide. If he's healthy, I feel like they go to Gesicki more, and they trust him more than Andre Iosivas. We'll see if Yoshi in year 4 takes a step forward. But he's a big, solidly fast downfield vertical threat that runs a lot of clear out routes. So I'm not even treating the progression half the time. Whereas it seems like Gesicki, they move to isolate a defender. Maybe they get a slot corner on him. Maybe you get a linebacker on him or safety. Honestly, they feel good about any of those 3. How do you want to cover him? He's either going to win with size, speed, route running, ball skills, right? They feel pretty good using Gesicki. The wild card here is that they really have leaned on Chase Brown in the receiving game. And it's a guy that can give you 65 targets plus probably. I think they could even, if they built in more screens into this offense that were effective, he's really not getting much of that some of these other receiving backs get the benefit of. But they will go to him. He's one of the better receiving backs in the league. They trust him in pass protection. Even though P. Ryan is really good, Chase Brown has been solid as well. So it's not like they're pulling him out to get Chase Brown in to protect or to get P. Ryan in to protect. I think they're comfortable having Chase Brown run everything and give him breaks here and there. He could, honestly, if Yoshi is splitting snaps when maybe Colby Young was drafted, maybe it's they get Tanner Hudson in and go 2 tight ends. Maybe Eric Alls gets more of a bigger share of the tight end workload, which I think he will. Maybe that gets split up even more, and it ends up being Chase Brown's number 3 in targets and yards.
The draft nerd in me is bummed you didn't mention Mitchell Tinsley, because he was one of my my deep sleeper guys. He made some awesome
even what
catches
he is
last
right
year.
Now, even what he is right now, even if it's 20 targets again, he has overcome his draft status.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, back to the defense for a second. Just how worried are you about these young linebackers? For you, how bad truly was it watching them last year, and how much hope do you have here in year 2 with these guys?
Well, to start, as a draft guy and a draft nerd, I was not high on Demetrius Knight or Barrett Carter. So when I heard, if you guys watch the show, if you're a follower of mine, we know what's coming on draft night, right? And it's like, man, I can't believe they have second round grades on Knight and Carter. And it was very nerve wracking to watch it play out. But also they had a second round grade on Barrett Carter, who ended up being there in the 4th round.
Way.
So they really like him. They gave him the green dot. That's why they benched Logan Wilson in week 3 and traded him away. He was done. He was spent. But at the same time, it's why they felt so good about Carter. But that just seems like a terrible process. And that scares me more than anything, that's their evaluation, that they're willing to take either of those guys where they did. Now, Knight, though, I thought he looked a lot like he did on tape as rookie year, so we can put this together. Very energetic player with good athleticism, speed. He'll lay out for plays. He'll run through blockers. I like the level of intensity he plays with. He was a 25-year-old rookie. That's usually not a good thing. He played 1 year of Division I linebacker, usually not a good sign, but kind of muddies the water a little bit. Normally 25-year-olds don't progress big time.
He started as a quarterback, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe there is more growth to him. He's going to be an interesting one to watch and see how much better he gets. His flash plays last year, to me, I just went back and watched both their film the entirety of the year. I thought his splash plays and the flashes you get were very enticing. I would like to develop a guy that looks like that. Wish he wasn't 26 already, but it is what it is. We'll keep moving. Barrett Carter, though, is the more cerebral, more aware, and processes better, cleaner, understands how offenses are trying to attack him or move him, and how quarterbacks are trying to move him and hit the window behind him. He is just not as aggressive. He's not as physical as Knight is. He's not overly strong. He is just a solid blend. When I go around the league, though, they were terrible last year in a lot of ways. They got better throughout the year, as linebackers tend to do. They missed a lot of tackles. They ran around like they had blinders on. They had no idea what was going on in front of them. All of that got cleaned up towards the second half of the year and really ended the last month, where you're like, okay, if that's where they're going, you'll be okay. The only reason I'm even slightly hopeful, other than the flashes and the progression, I go and I watch the league, and I don't know there's another position around the league that looks as bad as it does right now as linebacker does. I think it's a tough transition from college to the NFL. I think it's a completely different position in a lot of ways. You're going from playing, a lot of these colleges are one linebacker on the field, right? And then these other guys a safety, or he may be a slot corner, or he's an edge guy. And you're out there on your lonesome. You got 3 down linemen in front of you. It's just a completely different game. What they have to do at the NFL level and the calls they have to make and wearing that green dot, it is completely different. And that makes me hopeful that looking at where these guys around the league, where these linebackers have come from, a lot of mid-round picks, some late-round picks. And I'm like, yeah, they end up being okay players for you, and you can survive with that.
Yeah, you see the linebacker position at large, like almost identical to me. All right, last question on the defense here is about Dax Hill, who I went back and rewatched some of his tape here the last couple of days. And he gets me super excited, man. I mean, he just has all the traits to play outside corner. He was borderline lockdown once they really stuck with him in the second half of the year. I mean, the way I look at this is like he could be one of the breakout players of the league this year and get a huge contract. Like, are you on that boat, or do you need to talk me down off of that a little bit?
No, I won't talk you down at all. I also just finished a film review a couple weeks ago on Dax Hill, because we're all talking about the extension of DJ Turner and where does he rank in Fowler's rankings on ESPN. I think it was like 15 or so. And we're like, oh, is he going to get paid like a top 10 corner? And people aren't talking about Dax. And to me, I went back and I'm like, I thought he was pretty good. Let me go put on the film, and especially watch when they put him back at boundary corner. Like, PFF loved him last year, the previous year, when he played boundary corner before tearing his ACL. And then this year, it's like, okay, they moved him halfway through the year. Let's see how he finished. They loved him. I think he ended up number 3 in coverage grade for the final 7 weeks. But he was really good in the second half. I went back and watched film, and I'm like, yeah, this is a guy who was very long, has good speed, athletic, really was challenging receivers with pressing them, riding them, staying in their hip. And then the ball skills were there, which is something that with Dax, I wasn't sure he ever would develop, because he was an inside the box kind of guy, always kind of angled and facing towards the ball. It's tough when you're a boundary corner and your back's to the ball a lot more. And I thought he played well there. He had a bunch of pass breakups, I think 5 of them in the second half of the year. And I'm like, yeah, guys, if they're offering him $15 to $18 million, I wouldn't take that if I was Dax. I would bet that I'm going to put that together for a full year this year, and you're getting $25 million in the offseason next year. I agree. I think not only a breakout candidate, where if the Bengals go where they think they can go, and we're talking, we're late in January and the Bengals are still in the playoffs, and the national narrative is like, they had a lot of guys develop this year on defense, and they're mentioning like Dax Hill, really breakout year. I'm like, yeah, it really started. You guys are late. It's happened last year. You should have recognized that it was coming. The Bengals are really strong at the 2 boundary positions with DJ Turner and Dax Hill.
Do you think they can afford to keep both of them?
I don't. No, I think it seems like 20 million at the minimum for each guy would get it done. And then you could start talking 22, 23. I think at that point, they made their decisions, I think, by signing who they did on offense, carrying a little bit more of a veteran offense, and paying guys like Mike Gesicki and Ted
they're going to
Karras
pay Dax, right?
Yeah. And Amarius Mims is going to come up. If he develops in year 3, you're going to want to extend him as early as possible. They extended Dax, right? It's going to be tough.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, last question here. What were your kind of draft takes on their, obviously no first round pick, but their higher picks? So Cassius Howell, Takario Davis, Connor Liu, and Colby Young. I'm just curious as a fellow draft nerd, like where we were both at with these guys.
So I was a big fan of Cassius Howell in terms of just, hey, do you want a designated type pass rusher that can win with speed, agility, good ghost move? I mean, it just really threatens you with how much ground he can cover laterally. He'll take one step in and bounce out maybe 3 yards on an offensive lineman. Really tough to get your hands on him. Historically short arms and small, right? It's just, but you don't get your hands on him too often. He almost plays without arms at times, just dipping around guys.
Yeah.
I think he completes what they have at defensive end. If you're saying like Boye Mafe, solid player, good get off, right? Good strong player, got some lateral quickness. Doesn't always win the cleanest. He can collect pressures, maybe not collect a lot of sacks. Miles Murphy, great get off. He's usually in like the top 5 or so if you use next gen stats. Doesn't really have the feel for a pass rusher. Doesn't really bend well. His hands almost never land, but the length and speed can create some chaos. Then you got Shamar Stewart, who's just a battering ram that's blindfolded, and you hope you can turn something out of nothing there and get his arms to work. He's an inflatable arm man out there, just you just don't know what he's doing. But if you can, there at times they use him to set up stunts and picks and stuff, and he'll run through a brick wall. If you tell him that's the target, he'll do it, and that can be useful. And then you get in a guy who is just hard to get your hands on, right? Like in Cassius Howell. I think you could have all 4 guys complement each other pretty well. Gives you a nice buffet, including the defensive tackles that we talked about of guys you can move around the defensive line. So I was very happy with that pick. Takario Davis, to me, a little uncanny valley where I look at him and he almost looks CGI or fake or AI because he's 6'4" and 194 pounds and he moves pretty well at that size. I mean, nothing really compare him to. Not too many guys like that, but really good deep speed. I thought he had great ball skills. He can really lean on receivers and they are wondering why they're not getting the flag. He's not touching you. He's just leaning on you and he's a lot bigger and he's in better position to make a play on this ball. But guys like that are tough evaluations because they end up being high cut. They don't change directions as well. They don't accelerate as well. They can get turned around a little bit in coverage, right? So I don't know. We'll see if we see him and when we see him at boundary corner. Connor Liu, one of the youngest players in this draft, they needed a center of the future. I thought his tape was good the previous year. We didn't get to see so much of him this year before he got injured, which is why he was there in the 4th round. I thought he needed to get stronger and just start moving at a higher speed to be worth that. I think Dane Brugler had him top 50 going into the season. And had he have progressed, he would have probably been a top 50, if not top 40 pick, but he didn't progress in that time before he got hurt. So I'm excited to see him when we see him again and how much better he looks. He's 20 years old, right? You're watching him on tape. He's 19. There's a lot of projection there, but typically a good sign you're starting that early.
And is he, I think I saw that they're thinking he actually might be ready to start practicing for camp.
Yeah, they pretty much held him out up until this point. So we're going to see on day 1, is it like a short-term pup list where they can pull him off after a couple of days? That tends to be how teams do it. They want to see you on the sidelines, get their hands on you, and then be like, okay, he's good to go and put him in. But sounds like he's close. And then Colby Young, wide receiver, who's been in multiple teams, but let's say Georgia at this point. He kind of he's like a poor man's T in terms of size, movement skills. When you're that big, it's kind of hard to break down and cut, and T is at another level of it. But I wondered if they wanted a guy that they could, shadow T. Higgins a little bit. How does he run that route? How does he do this? How does he do that? He's an older player that struggled to have consistent production, didn't score high for us. Like the guys who didn't score high for us here are Colby Young, Davis and Liu, because he was injured, are like moderate risk picks. Cassius Howell was a good pick. But then if we didn't mention day 3, because these guys may not make it, but I love Brian Parker, Jack Andrews, and Land Robinson, especially when you factor in the value. I think all 3 make the team. And I think Parker is good. I think he's eventually going to be the guy that replaces Dalton Reisner, and he's your starting right guard for the next 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw all of that very similarly. I was definitely low on Davis and Young. Like I thought I looked at this as kind of a roller coaster draft. Like really loved Howell. I thought the Chiefs really screwed up. Personally, I was not as high on who did R. Mason Thomas? I like because Cassius Howell and R. Mason Thomas were kind of in the same ballpark. I liked Howell a lot more than Thomas personally, so I thought Bengals kind of got the better end of the stick there.
And I think Howell thought that he was going to go to the Chiefs, and he is a Chiefs fan, so I can't wait to see if he ever wants some revenge.
That's going to be fun.
Future.
Yeah. Definitely not betting on Davis or Young personally, but we'll see. Just kind of gambles.
I'm with you.
Yep. But yeah, I think Lou could absolutely develop into a starter someday. So awesome. All right. Final question. Over or under 10.5 wins for the Bengals this year? I ask all my guests.
They are favored in 15 if you look at FanDuel, which seems absolutely crazy. If you're not a fan of the Bengals, because we are pretty high on the Bengals, I think. We believe in Joe Burrow. We believe this offense will be top 5 at the very least. When Burrow, Chase, and Higgins are all together on the field, their EPA per play is insane. Like we want that. We want to see it for 17 games. I think the league would like to see it for 17 games, to be honest, at this point. Only when it doesn't are the rivals that don't want to see this thing. But if the defense could be 16th in the league, to be honest with you, they should win 12 games, and which makes me think I should take the over. Now, am I as convinced that L. Golden? We basically did all of this, and I don't feel as confident. I think the defense will be okay. I think it'll have splash plays. I think it can get the ball back to Joe Burrow, which is maybe all it needs to be. Can it be timely, and can it make plays? I think it can be that. And for that, I'm going to take the over on 10.5 and say it should be 11, 12, or potentially even 13.
All right. I like it. Well, thank you, Joe. This was a ton of fun. Thanks for being gracious with your time. Just remind the people one last time what you got going on, where they can find you.
Yeah, daily Bengals podcast, Locked On Bengals. I host there with my buddy Jake, and on Twitter, where I will be analyzing the film there. I have a subscription page on there where we dive deeper than you ever need to go at Joe Goodberry. And otherwise on YouTube, check out Bengals on the Brain.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for watching. So a massive thanks to Joe. That was a really fun interview. A lot of people were asking for us to connect this year. Glad we were able to make it happen. Let's now, though, take a look at the Bengals schedule and actually talk about my predictions for the Bengals here. Do I think this team actually finishes as 17th ranked team on the season? This is definitely a team that I'm hoping I can look back on for the most part and be like, look, I got my process. We had our questions. It's a preseason power ranking. I think the Bengals heading into week 1, if you're making power rankings at 17, makes sense. I'm pretty high on this Bengals team and what they're going to do this year. And honestly, so is Vegas. So are the bettors. The bettors are actually really high on the Bengals, as if last year didn't happen and they're right back to being Super Bowl contenders, because their over-under is 10.5, which is about as high as it gets. Like, you got to realize how good of a team you got to be to have a 10.5 over-under, especially when the NFL is as deep as they are. And they're 10th to 12th for Super Bowl odds. Now, who your quarterback is and what your upside is obviously plays a factor in your Super Bowl odds, so I get that. I felt like I was really optimistic on the Bengals. I'm predicting them to have a 10-win season. I was stunned that actually would not win their season over-under bet. But I absolutely think the Bengals will be in the playoff mix. And when I look at this division, I think their odds are on the money. They are plus 185, second in division odds. And the math isn't perfect, but they're basically saying there's a 1 in 3 chance the Bengals win this division. I think that makes sense, if not even a little higher. I actually really like bets on the Bengals to win the division or even win the conference, which I didn't look those odds up, but you're probably talking about 8 or 9 to 1 to win the conference, if not a little bit better than that. I just looked it up. It's 10 to 1 plus 10.25 to win the AFC. I actually like that, and will probably be making that bet myself, because you don't need everything to go right with this defense. You just need some of these things to go right, and Joe Burrow to stay healthy. The AFC is pretty open, in my opinion. That's to the extent that I'm high on this Bengals team. I really can see it, and I can see this ranking aging like milk. The problem is their floor sucks. If Joe Burrow gets hurt and this defense doesn't figure it out, they're in top 5 pick range, right? That's a 4-win team. You have to factor in Joe Burrow's injury potential into this thing. It feels like the betting market is just assuming he's going to stay healthy. And look, I obviously hope it happens, but I don't think you can hang your hat on that. So their floor is much lower than some of these teams around it that we've talked about. 4-win floor. The win ceiling, though, I think 12 wins as a ceiling, with a schedule, by the way, that is pretty favorable. I mean, they got their tough games in there. They got to go to Houston week 2. This team always starts slow. I'd be pretty damn surprised if they win that. Baltimore week 7 on the road will be tough. That's after the bye week, though, which is great. They have to play Atlanta in Madrid but it's better than having to go to Atlanta, where that was supposed to be a road game. So they get a benefit there. Outside of that, I mean, every game is winnable for them. I definitely believe that. So I do think the schedule helps play into the idea that you could be higher on this Bengals team this year. And I'm excited to see that all play out, man. And I obviously make my preseason like final picks. These win total picks are going to stay the same for that video, by the way, unless there's like major injuries that makes me want to shift it. I'm not spoiling Super Bowl picks and stuff quite yet in these deep dive series. I will say this, though, to reward those of you that have stuck through this Bengals deep dive 2.5 hours through. I'm strongly considering the Bengals to be my AFC Super Bowl pick this year. And yes, for this ranking to age like milk, right? That's a testament, I think, to like what this series is really about. This is a preseason power ranking, but I love the Bengals' chance to exceed this ranking. I really do. And that'd be a great place to end the video. However, we do have to make some superlative picks for this team as well. This is going to go a little bit quicker because I think a lot of these are pretty obvious. Team MVP, when I don't pick quarterbacks for this award, because that's obvious. Jamar Chase, that's also pretty obvious. The dude's fucking awesome. Biggest wild card. There's a bunch of different guys on the defense that are big wild cards. Like the entire defense is the wild card for the most part. But I think on top of all of that, Al Golden, like getting good coaching to tie everything together and ensure that some of these individual players that are wild cards can hit green lights and be the best version of themselves. I'm putting a lot of pressure on Al Golden to be the guy that does that. Breakout offense, Amarius Mims. Pretty damn easy pick, especially when the rest of this offense is pretty established. If I'm going to pick a breakout defensive player from this defense, I did go with Dax Hill. I'm obviously really high on what he's going to do. I think he's freaking awesome. I'm not even sure that he isn't better than DJ Turner, and that's saying a lot. So I'm really excited to see Dax Hill here in a big contract season for him. Unsung hero, I went with BJ Hill. I really like the fact that he's still here and nobody's going to talk about him. But if leveraged correctly, I think he can open things up for Dexter Lawrence on early downs. He could even, as Joe pointed out, like a really good point in the interview there was like, you can, like the Giants had to play Dexter Lawrence every snap because they never put any depth around him. If you want Dexter to get a breather and go into killer mode on third down, you can have BJ Hill do some of that dirty work. And he's also going to be good for Jonathan Allen in that sense too. So I think he is probably like never going to get a lot of praise here, but I think he theoretically opens a lot up for that D-line. Fantasy MVP was really hard, honestly, because Joe Burrow's QB4, a guy that doesn't give you that rushing production, that's probably right. Jamar Chase is going like anywhere from the 3rd to 6th pick in the draft. Like, that makes sense. T. Higgins, I thought would be the pick, but he's also like, he's wide receiver 14. I think he probably finishes wide receiver 10 to 15. Like, that probably makes sense. He's going in like the 4th round. So like, I thought maybe people would be sleeping on him. They're not. Chase Brown is going like late 2nd round. That makes sense. If I'm hunting for value, I'm not saying those guys wouldn't be great picks. I would draft all those guys where they're going in your fantasy leagues and be very happy and sleep like a baby, which like now that I have a baby, why is that a saying? Like babies don't sleep that well or all that long. Anyway, my fantasy MVP, the guy that I think provides some value is Mike Gesicki, who like basically isn't getting drafted. He did split reps with Noah Fant last year in that like athletic tight end mold. Theoretically, they want him to split with Eric All. I don't think Eric All can stay healthy. Mike Gesicki as like the full-time hybrid starting tight end should see a ramp up in production, and he's got like touchdown potential and like should be pretty steady. I think Mike Gesicki has a extremely high chance of exceeding his placement as the 43rd tight end getting drafted in PPR leagues. That does not make sense to me. He's going to be in deeper leagues, be startable, but it depends on your league too. Like you're probably going to have some better options out there too, but tough one to pick when this team's putting up points and people know it, and you got to pay the price to get those top guys, and that makes sense. But there are your Bengals superlative awards and your Bengals deep dive. This was a really fun one. I can't wait for the age like milk comments. It is what it is. And again, teams like the next two teams literally got the same rating. Like it is, yeah, they're 17th, but it's like it's 15C. Like they're right there, man, right on the cusp of the playoffs. Just need some things to go right. And if they do, they could go really right here in Cincinnati. So I'm stoked to watch the Bengals this year. Stoked to pay that Etsy witch to keep, which is a real thing, by the way, if you didn't know. But stoked to hopefully pay an Etsy witch to keep Joe Burrow healthy this year. We went to a wedding this summer that was supposed to rain, and the bride paid an Etsy witch like $13 for it to be nice. And it was like a beautiful May day in Minnesota, which doesn't always happen. So I'm actually going to do that, and hopefully it works. But that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Please do hit that like button if you haven't yet. It takes a split second, and it really does help. If you are one of the podcast listeners, by the way, for the Fully Inflated Football Show, if you could leave a review, I really appreciate it. It's really the only way to like help the show grow on iTunes or Spotify or wherever it is you are listening to the audio version. So shout out to the audio listeners as well. Hope the Spotify people have enjoyed getting actual like video on Spotify. I figured that out. That's new. But either way, let me know your comments down below. What you think of this deep dive, who you think comes next with the number 16 spot. It's going to be a few days. We're going to visit family in Chicago these next 4 or 5 days. So there's going to be a little bit of a break, I think, in between deep dives, but we'll be right back at it when I come back home. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you soon. Cheers.